Chapter 25-22. Alchemy Fire. I'm definitely interested. But it's just a 4th grade divine fire. You can get it. There's no need for me to come here personally. Qin Feiyang frowned. He had given Jiang Dafei so many divine gems and soul stones last time. Even if he split them equally with Fan Yunjiang, it was more than enough to bid for a few 4th grade divine lights. I don't have enough divine gems. Otherwise, I wouldn't dare to bother you, young lord. Jiang Dafei smiled bitterly. Not enough. You've used up all the divine gems I gave you? Qin Feiyang was surprised. Yes. Jiang Dafei nodded. So fast. Qin Feiyang was stunned. Young lord, please don't misunderstand. I didn't spend any of these divine gems. Here's the thing. Now not only Fan Yunjiang and I, but also Lei Bing and the others are following you. If there are benefits, we naturally have to share them. Therefore, after discussing with old Fan, we decided to distribute the soul stones and divine crystals you've given us. Jiang Dafei said. I see. Qin Feiyang suddenly understood. If that was the case, then there was nothing to say. After all, there were more than 1,000 people. If they each had a little, there wouldn't be much left. Jiang Dafei asked carefully. Young lord, you're not angry, are you? It's good to know how to share. Why would I be angry? Qin Feiyang was speechless. That's good. Jiang Dafei breathed a sigh of relief. Okay then. I've been in the Divine Prefecture for so long. Except for the Treasure Pavilion in Black Rock City, I haven't been to any other Treasure Pavilion. Let's go take a look. Qin Feiyang smiled. Okay. Jiang Dafei nodded. Since you've become the city lord, hurry up and come to the Black Tortoise Realm to cultivate in seclusion. Break through to the Peak Ninth Heavens Realm as soon as possible. Qin Feiyang said. Then let's do it today. When I've arranged the affairs of the City Lord Mansion, I'll go to the Treasure Pavilion to find you. Jiang Dafei said. Okay. Qin Feiyang nodded. Then this subordinate will go and get busy. Jiang Dafei smiled and turned off the image crystal. Qin Feiyang also put away the image crystal, left the cultivation room, and walked out of the ancient castle. Currently, the Black Tortoise world wasn't just a land of demons. The spiritual essence and soul vein energies in other places were so dense that they could be vaporized. A day in the outside world was equivalent to 100 years in the Black Tortoise world. After 30,000 years of discovery, the living beings of the Black Tortoise world had grown several times stronger than before. Now let alone false gods, even more gods could be seen everywhere. What are you doing, girl? Qin Feiyang asked with a smile as he walked into the tea garden and looked at the busy Fire Lotus. He's out. Fire Lotus raised her head and looked at Qin Feiyang, wiping the sweat from her forehead. Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded and saw that Fire Lotus was holding a bamboo basket in her hand. Inside the basket were pieces of emerald green tea leaves. It turned out that she was picking tea leaves. Qin Feiyang also reached out and picked a few tea leaves. He placed them at the tip of his nose and smelled them. Wisps of fragrance immediately entered his nose. Suddenly, Qin Feiyang seemed to have thought of something. He turned to Fire Lotus and asked, Hong Yi, how did you deal with them? Dead. Fire Lotus smiled. Qin Feiyang nodded. These two people didn't deserve sympathy. It didn't matter if they died. He said, Why do I feel that there's something wrong with the power of law you told me last time? What's wrong? Fire Lotus was puzzled. I remember that you said that you would only know what kind of power of law you have after you awaken the power of law. But how did I comprehend the power of law of light from the power of law of darkness directly? Qin Feiyang was puzzled. Fire Lotus was stunned. She shook her head and smiled. There's only one word to explain it. What word? Qin Feiyang looked at her in confusion. Fire Lotus said, You're a freak. Qin Feiyang was speechless. What did this have to do with being a freak? As far as I know, no matter who it is, they can only comprehend one kind of power of law in their lifetime. And they have to wait until they break through to the imperishable realm. But what about you? You comprehended the power of law of light when you just became an immortal. If that's not a freak, then what is? So what happened to you can't be explained by common sense. Fire Lotus said. Qin Feiyang couldn't help but smile bitterly. Fire Lotus suddenly smiled and said, Actually, I'm also about to comprehend the power of law. Ha! Qin Feiyang was surprised. Although I've been living a very ordinary life in the Black Tortoise world these years, it's this kind of life that has brought me a lot of benefits. The biggest of which is the transformation of my state of mind. I have no desires and no desires. I look at this world with an ordinary heart. From the various states of the world, I understand the meaning of life. From all living things, I peek at the foundation of the universe. Fire Lotus said with a smile. Qin Feiyang stared at Fire Lotus in a daze. In a trance, he felt that there seemed to be an ethereal aura on Fire Lotus's body. Then do you know what the power of law you've comprehended is now? Qin Feiyang asked. But Fire Lotus just smiled. Still keeping me in suspense. Qin Feiyang was speechless. Okay, you can slowly comprehend it. Senior brother crazy, 5-clawed golden dragon, come with me. Holy Dragon City. Although 9 months had passed, Qin Feiyang's ransacking of the major cities in the north and his battle with the dragons in the internal sea were still hot topics. I've lived for more than 100,000 years, and I've never admired anyone except Qin Feiyang. That's right. Ransacking the major cities is already openly provoking the dragons. And he actually went to the internal sea. What's even worse, not only did he escape safely, but he also stole the dragon's heaven-defying divine artifact. Everything this little guy does is always so shocking. In a certain tea house, a few old men sat together and discussed this matter with a myriad of emotions. And not far away, 2 young men in luxurious clothes were sitting. When they heard the discussion of the old men, there was a trace of displeasure in their eyes. This person really knows how to be in the limelight. One of them snorted coldly. Don't take offense. After all, he came from a small place like the Great Qin. The other person held a folding fan in his hand and smiled faintly. Then let's go to the treasure pavilion. I heard that the treasure pavilion is auctioning a grade 4 divine pillfire today. Maybe we can meet him. After all, he's an alchemist. Then I'm really looking forward to seeing how capable he is. After the 2 of them finished speaking, they got up to pay the bill and left the tea house. North City Gate. There was an endless stream of people entering and leaving the Holy Dragon City. A burly young man dressed in black walked towards the city gate alone. And on his wrist, there was a 5-clawed golden dragon tattoo. That's right. This person was Qin Feiyang. This time, he didn't hide and entered the Holy Dragon City as Li Bu'er. After the mad scientist took him out of the Dragon God Palace, he entered the ancient castle and continued to cultivate in seclusion. As for the tattoo on his wrist, it was naturally formed by the 5-clawed golden dragon. However, the 5-clawed golden dragon hid its aura. Even if it was seen by others, they would only think that it was a tattoo. They would never think that it was a 5-clawed golden dragon that had just formed. In front of the city gate, there were 4 half-step 9 Heaven's Realm guards. Everyone who entered and left the city had to be checked by the Heaven's Eye Stone. However, Qin Feiyang wasn't nervous at all. He walked in front of the 4 guards and took out the identity token of the Dragon God Palace. You are Li Bu'er, one of the guards exclaimed. Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded. Li Bu'er, the young man who killed the first island master and humiliated the 10th elder of the Black Dragon clan in public. The guard's exclamation immediately alarmed the people entering and leaving the city. Everyone looked at Qin Feiyang. Although Li Bu'er's reputation wasn't as good as Qin Feiyang's, he was still famous in the Holy Dragon City. Humiliating the 10th elder was something that countless people wanted to do but didn't dare to do. The news of the 10th elder's humiliation has already spread? Qin Feiyang was stunned. It was true that good things didn't go out, but bad things traveled 1,000 miles. It seemed that it would be impossible to keep a low profile in the future. One of the guards came back to his senses and quickly looked at the other 3 guards. Let him go. Then the 4 retreated to the side. Qin Feiyang put away the identity token and smiled. Don't you need to check? No need, no need. The 4 waved their hands. He was such a famous person. What was there to check? Besides, this person not only had a good relationship with the law enforcement hall master of the Dragon God Palace, but also had a supreme expert protecting him. Even if they were given the courage, they wouldn't dare to check. Qin Feiyang smiled and prepared to enter the Holy Dragon City. But suddenly, he seemed to have noticed something. Turning his head to look behind him, he saw a woman in white standing in the crowd, looking at the city gate with a thoughtful look. The woman's clothes and hair were a little messy, and she looked extremely haggard. There was even a lot of dirt on her body, but it could be seen that she was a very beautiful woman. However, this wasn't what attracted Qin Feiyang. What really attracted him was the aura that this woman exuded, which seemed to give him a sense of familiarity. Is there anything else? The four guards looked at Qin Feiyang suspiciously. Nothing. Qin Feiyang came back to his senses and turned to enter the Holy Dragon City with a trace of doubt. He was sure that he had never seen this woman before. But why did he vaguely feel a sense of familiarity? It's really strange. The more Qin Feiyang thought about it, the more puzzled he became. He simply stood behind the city gate and turned to look at the woman in white. The woman in white looked at the city gate, as if hesitating about something. But in the end, the woman stepped forward and walked to the city gate. After being checked, she entered the city. After entering the city, the woman in white and Qin Feiyang brushed past each other. The sense of familiarity in Qin Feiyang's heart grew stronger. But the woman in white didn't pay attention to Qin Feiyang. She didn't even look at him, and there was a trace of sadness between her eyebrows that couldn't be removed. That frail figure also seemed a little lonely. Who is it? Qin Feiyang looked at the woman's back and kept searching in his mind. Suddenly, he quivered and finally thought of the source of this sense of familiarity. Enchantment. That's right. It was the enchantment that he saw when he fainted in the forest and woke up. At that time, the aura emitted by the divine power enchantment was very similar to the aura that this woman in white was exuding at this moment. Is it her? Qin Feiyang muttered and strode to catch up with the woman. Looking at the woman's back, he hesitated for a while and stepped in front of the woman. He cupped his hands and said, "Mississippi." Chapter 25-23. However, the woman in white didn't notice Qin Feiyang, who suddenly appeared in front of her. And she didn't seem to hear Qin Feiyang's voice. She directly bumped into Qin Feiyang. Boom! The woman in white subconsciously thought that someone was plotting against her, so she directly released a stream of divine power. Without a doubt, Qin Feiyang was in trouble. Unprepared, he was immediately sent flying by the divine power. The pedestrians in front of him were also in trouble. Qin Feiyang was sent flying, and a large number of them were knocked down. Who is it? Are you tired of living? There was a sudden burst of angry curses. But when they saw that it was Qin Feiyang, they immediately shut up. But they were all muttering in their hearts. What's wrong with Li Buer? Qin Feiyang was lying on the ground awkwardly. There was a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth, but there was a bitter smile on his face. He didn't expect to make such a joke. He quickly got up and wiped the blood at the corner of his mouth. Looking at those people who were knocked down by him, he cupped his hands and said, "I'm really sorry. Please forgive me." "It's okay. But brotherly, what did you do just now?" Everyone looked at Qin Feiyang suspiciously. Qin Feiyang smiled bitterly and turned to look at the woman in white. It was just a greeting. Was there a need to have such a big reaction? Everyone also looked at the woman in white. Looking at the divine power around the woman in white, they immediately understood. It turned out that this woman had attacked Li Buer. In other words, Li Buer was actually a victim. However, looking at Qin Feiyang and the surrounding crowd, the woman in white was a little confused. When she came back to her senses, the woman in white looked at Qin Feiyang. There was a flash of cold light in her eyes, and she said, "What did you want to do to me just now?" Qin Feiyang was stunned. What was this? He just wanted to say hello, to solve the doubts in his heart. Why did it feel like he had improper thoughts? Say it. The white-clothed woman's expression turned even colder. The corner of Qin Feiyang's mouth twitched. "Miss, don't misunderstand. I didn't want to do anything to you. I just thought you looked a little familiar, so I wanted to ask you. I didn't expect things to turn out like this. I was rude. I hope you can forgive me." "Miss, that is indeed the case. Just now, Li Buer even shouted at you, but you didn't seem to hear him, so you collided with him. Then, you released your divine power and blasted him away. Those who had walked behind Qin Feiyang had seen the whole process. I see. The woman in white nodded in understanding. She looked at Qin Feiyang apologetically and said, I'm sorry. I'm fine. Qin Feiyang waved his hand. Fortunately, there were witnesses. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to explain himself. All right, let's disperse. There's nothing to see here. Someone said. Qin Feiyang looked at the people he had knocked down and smiled apologetically. Sorry. Perhaps because of Qin Feiyang's identity, those people also smiled and didn't make a fuss. How awkward. Qin Feiyang shook his head and looked at the woman in white. He asked suspiciously, Miss, is there something on your mind? The woman seemed to be a little absent-minded, but the woman in white didn't answer. She looked at Qin Feiyang and shook her head. We don't know each other. Then, she walked past Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang was stunned. He turned around and looked at the woman's back. Although the situation was a little awkward, he was sure that the barrier was set up by this woman, because the divine power she released was exactly the same as the aura of the divine power barrier. He didn't expect to meet such a kind person in the Holy Dragon City. And he didn't expect it to be a woman. Miss, if you really have any problems, you can tell me. Maybe I can help you. Qin Feiyang caught up with her and said with a friendly smile, Don't follow me. The woman in white seemed to be a little impatient. I really don't mean any harm. Qin Feiyang smiled bitterly. The woman in white stopped and turned to look at Qin Feiyang. She didn't say anything, but her eyes became colder and colder. Okay. Qin Feiyang was helpless. He wanted to repay the woman for her help, but he was asking for a snub. The woman in white withdrew her gaze, turned around, and left without saying a word. Women are really hard to understand. The five-clawed golden dragon's voice suddenly sounded in Qin Feiyang's mind. Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded. He was puzzled. Did he look like a bad guy? But it was understandable. After all, the woman in white didn't know that he was the person she helped. Young master, don't always think about repaying the favor. There's something you have to think about, the five-clawed golden dragon said. What is it? Qin Feiyang was suspicious. The five-clawed golden dragon said secretly. When you were unconscious, you didn't change your appearance. Qin Feiyang's face froze when he heard this. Your name has been spread all over the divine land. Although there are many people in the divine land who haven't seen you in person, I believe they must know what you look like. After all, divine power can condense into your appearance. But this woman didn't tell the dragons when she saw you. Instead, she helped you. Isn't it strange? The five-clawed golden dragon said. Qin Feiyang asked. Could it be that she lived in seclusion deep in the mountains, and didn't have many friends around her, and rarely went out of town? So she didn't recognize me? I think the chances of that are very small. After all, her cultivation is not weak. She's a half-step to the ninth heaven realm. And, although she looks a little disheveled, whether it's her temperament or her dress, she doesn't look like an ordinary person. The five-clawed golden dragon said. Qin Feiyang looked at the woman again, his eyes flickering. Although the woman had gone far, he could still vaguely see her. A half-step to the ninth heaven realm. Temperament. Clothes. These indeed showed that the woman had an extraordinary family background. But why didn't she recognize him back then? Or did the woman actually recognize him, but didn't tell the dragons? He really couldn't figure it out. Qin Feiyang shook his head and asked someone about the location of the treasure pavilion. Then he quickened his pace and walked toward the treasure pavilion. The treasure pavilion was located in the central area of the Holy Dragon City. It was not far from the City Lord's mansion, but Qin Feiyang used to go to the City Lord's mansion directly, so he didn't know about it. Soon, Qin Feiyang saw a majestic building. It was at least 100 feet tall and dazzling. Above the main door, there were two bold words that seemed to be carved with iron and silver. Treasure Pavilion. At this time, the sun had just risen, but there was already a sea of people in front of the treasure pavilion. This lively scene was not because of the 4th grade divine fire auction today, but because it happened every day. Although the treasure pavilion was located in all the cities in the north, the Holy Dragon City was one of the largest cities in the north. Naturally, the treasure pavilion of the other cities couldn't be compared to it. What the other treasure pavilions didn't have they generally had here. So, many people would travel thousands of miles to the treasure pavilion of the Holy Dragon City. Of course, there were also Snow Dragon City and Horned Dragon City, because these two cities were on par with the Holy Dragon City in terms of size and strength. The treasure pavilions of these two cities were naturally the same. Li Bu'er. He actually came to the treasure pavilion too? When Qin Feiyang appeared, he attracted many people's attention. Qin Feiyang ignored them and directly entered the treasure pavilion. Welcome, young master. Young master, this is your first time in our treasure pavilion. A rather pretty woman in her 20s, wearing a long red dress, came up to welcome Qin Feiyang. She smiled and said to Qin Feiyang, "Yes." Qin Feiyang nodded. "What? He has been in the Dragon God Palace for so many years, but this is his first time in the treasure pavilion." Everyone was stunned. What did this person usually do? No matter who it was, as long as they came to the Holy Dragon City, they would definitely come here to take a look. The woman in red said, "My name is Ren Xiaolan, a staff member of the treasure pavilion. Let me lead the way for you." "Okay." Qin Feiyang nodded. Ren Xiaolan smiled and asked, "Young master, what do you want to buy in the treasure pavilion this time?" Qin Feiyang thought for a moment and said, "When does the auction begin?" "There's still an hour left." Ren Xiaolan smiled. Qin Feiyang nodded and said with a faint smile, "Then show me around first." Okay. The first floor of the treasure pavilion is specially used to receive guests. The items for sale are on the second floor and above, and our treasure pavilion has a total of 10 floors. The items for sale on each floor are of different levels, and of course, the prices are definitely different. I'll show you the second and ninth floors first. Ren Xiaolan walked in front and introduced while walking to the second floor. On the second floor, it was much quieter. Everyone was silently looking at the items for sale on the counter. Even if someone spoke, it was very soft. Qin Feiyang walked around the second floor and went up to the third floor. About an hour later, he finally walked to the ninth floor. The items sold in the treasure pavilion were basically medicinal herbs, divine weapons, divine arts, divine jades, divine iron, pill furnaces, alchemy fires, and so on. But their levels were not high. Even on the ninth floor, the best were only perfect divine arts and supreme grade divine weapons, divine grade alchemy fires and divine alchemy furnaces, and the best were only first grade. Ren Xiaolan smiled and said, "It seems that there's nothing here that can catch your eye." Qin Feiyang smiled faintly and said, "Let's go to the 10th floor to take a look." Ren Xiaolan looked a little embarrassed when she heard that. "What's wrong?" Qin Feiyang was suspicious. Ren Xiaolan said, "To be honest, the 10th floor restricts humans from entering." "What? Restricts humans from entering?" Qin Feiyang was stunned. There was such a rule. Yes. Whether it's the treasure pavilion in Holy Dragon City, Snow Dragon City, or Horned Dragon City, only dragons can enter the 10th floor. This is the rule of the chief pavilion master, so we can't do anything about it. Please forgive us," Ren Xiaolan said. Qin Feiyang couldn't help but shake his head. Only dragons could enter the 10th floor. What a ridiculous rule. The treasure pavilion, forget it. The treasure pavilion had no choice. After all, dragons ruled the divine land, and the treasure pavilion had to compromise. Get lost. Suddenly, a cold shout was heard. In the quiet atmosphere, it was particularly loud. There were hundreds of people on the 9th floor. When they heard the shout, they were slightly stunned and immediately looked in the direction of the sound. This voice. Qin Feiyang was also stunned, and a figure immediately appeared in his mind. The woman in white. When he turned his head, the owner of the shout was indeed the woman in white. She was here too. Chapter 3, Release at 10. Chapter 25-24. The woman in white stood at the top of the stairs, looking coldly at a staff member standing in front of her. This staircase was leading to the 10th floor. The staff member looked at the woman in white awkwardly and said, "Miss, you really can't go up to the 10th floor." "I don't want to say it again." The woman in white said, "You really can't." The staff member shook his head. The woman in white's eyes were extremely cold. Ren Xiaolan retracted her gaze and looked at Qin Feiyang. She said apologetically. Young master, you walk around by yourself. I'll go and take a look. Okay. Qin Feiyang nodded. Ren Xiaolan immediately ran over and asked the staff member. What's going on? The staff member said. Sister Xiaolan. She insists on going to the 10th floor. I can't stop her. Ren Xiaolan looked at the woman in white and waved her hand. You go down first. I'll deal with it. Thank you, Sister Xiaolan. The staff member said gratefully and turned to run downstairs. Mississippi. The rules were set by the chief pavilion master. We're just working here. If we let you go up now, we'll all be punished. Can you not make things difficult for us? Ren Xiaolan looked at the woman in white and smiled apologetically. The white-clothed woman remained silent, but an invisible wave of terrifying pressure spread out. Ren Xiaolan couldn't help sweating on her forehead. She hurriedly said, What do you want? You can tell me. I'll do my best to help you. What if I insist on going up? The woman in white was very domineering. Ren Xiaolan was at a loss. How could there be such an unreasonable person? Miss, is it fun to make things difficult for a worker? If you really want to go to the 10th floor, you can go to the steward or the chief pavilion master. Besides, rules are rules. Unless you're a dragon, you have to abide by them. A few people couldn't help but speak up for Ren Xiaolan. The woman in white looked at the people who spoke, and a cold light flashed in her eyes. Miss, this is the treasure pavilion. Do you want to fight? They were not afraid at all. The atmosphere gradually became a little heavy. Only dragons can go in, right? But at this time, there was a faint laugh. Everyone looked in the direction of the voice and was slightly stunned. Li Bua, what did this guy mean by that? Qin Feiyang smiled faintly and walked to the side of the lady in white. He smiled and said, We sure are fated. The woman in white raised her eyebrows. Don't be so cold. I'm here to help you, Qin Feiyang said. The woman in white was stunned. She looked at Qin Feiyang suspiciously, as if she was questioning him. How are you going to help me? When Ren Xiaolan heard this, she also looked at Qin Feiyang in confusion. You're not dragons, so how are you going to help her? Qin Feiyang smiled and said, Little gold, come out. Ding! Immediately, a dragon roar resounded. The 5-clawed golden dragon flew out from Qin Feiyang's wrist and hovered in front of Qin Feiyang. However, at this moment it was only a meter long. He didn't reveal his cultivation either. But that pure dragon might shock everyone present. 5 claws. It's actually a 5-clawed golden dragon. Only the purest golden dragon can give birth to a 5-clawed dragon. It is said that among the dragons today, only the ancestral dragon and the patriarch of the Golden Dragon clan have 5 dragon claws. What's going on? Why is there a 5-clawed golden dragon beside Li Buer? Everyone was in disbelief. Ren Xiaolan and the woman in white were also surprised. Ahem. To be honest, Little Gold is actually the son of the Golden Dragon clan's patriarch. Qin Feiyang said. What the hell? The 5-clawed golden dragon was stunned. The son of the Golden Dragon clan's patriarch? Why didn't he say that he was the son of the ancestral dragon? He really knew how to brag. Qin Feiyang looked at Ren Xiaolan and asked with a smile. Miss Xiaolan, can we go in now? Ren Xiaolan stared at the 5-clawed golden dragon. If he was really the son of the Golden Dragon clan's patriarch, he could definitely go in. But the problem was it really? Li Bu, or don't joke around. Pretending to be a dragon is a big crime. Pretending to be the son of the dragon's patriarch is even more a capital crime. Besides, I don't believe that the son of the Golden Dragon clan's patriarch will follow you. Someone snorted. Pretending? I'm not in the mood. I asked Little Gold to hide in the past purely to keep a low profile. Qin Feiyang said proudly. Low profile? I really can't tell. Everyone couldn't help but despise him in their hearts. Miss Xiaolan, please lead the way. Don't anger Little Gold, or he will bring the dragons over and flatten your treasure pavilion. Qin Feiyang said with a smile with a bad heart. Hurry up. Don't waste my time. The 5-clawed golden dragon also shouted. Seeing this, Ren Xiaolan took 2 steps back and said, Please. She still had some doubts in her heart. Miss, let's go. Qin Feiyang called the woman in white and led the 5-clawed golden dragon to the 10th floor. The white-clothed woman looked at Qin Feiyang's back and quickly followed after him. The son of the golden dragons is actually hanging out with Li Buer. How is this possible? No one on the 9th floor believed it. In fact, it didn't matter to Qin Feiyang whether they believed it or not, as long as they could enter the 10th floor, because he was also a little curious about the 10th floor. As for how to deal with the consequences of this impersonation, it was just a matter of dealing with soldiers with arms and water with an earthweir. He would deal with it when the time came. Soon, Qin Feiyang, the 5-clawed golden dragon, and the woman in white entered the 10th floor. Ren Xiaolan had been following behind them. The 10th floor was a spacious hall, and there was no one in sight. But around the hall, there were transparent counters neatly placed spotless. Inside the counters, there were iron and jade boxes neatly placed. These iron and jade boxes, big and small, long and short, all contain the same thing. As soon as the woman in white entered the hall, she couldn't wait to run to the counters and check them one by one, as if she was looking for something. Qin Feiyang looked at the woman in white and walked to a counter suspiciously. There were more than a dozen iron boxes in the counter. The lids were open. In each iron box, there was a divine artifact. In the first iron box, there was a black dagger, about the length of a chopstick, with a black python pattern engraved on it. Judging from its aura, it was a peak-level divine artifact. Qin Feiyang looked at the other iron boxes. In the end, he found that they were all peak-level divine artifacts. This is a legendary divine artifact. The 5-clawed golden dragon suddenly exclaimed. A legendary divine artifact? Qin Feiyang was slightly stunned. He turned and walked to the 5-clawed golden dragon and looked at the iron box in the counter. In this iron box, there was a golden spear, as if it was made of gold. Judging from its aura, it was really a legendary divine artifact. The divine arts and divine artifacts on the 10th floor are all peak level and legendary. And there are alchemy furnaces and alchemy fires above the 4th grade. Not only that, there are all kinds of divine pills and precious medicinal herbs. Ren Xiaolan explained. Really? Qin Feiyang asked in surprise. Ren Xiaolan smiled and said, Young master, you can check them one by one. Qin Feiyang immediately looked all the way down the counter. Sure enough, it was true. There were legendary divine artifacts, legendary divine arts, alchemy fires and alchemy furnaces above the 4th grade, and divine pills. He even saw a few divine life pills with 2 dragon-shaped elixir spirits. 2 dragon-shaped elixir spirits, even he couldn't refine them now. China was really full of crouching tigers and hidden dragons. However, he didn't see any elixirs like the potential elixir. However, these good things were actually left for the dragons? Wasn't the way the treasure pavilion was doing things a little wrong? Ren Xiaolan glanced at the 5-clawed golden dragon, then looked at Qin Feiyang and asked, Young master, may I ask, is it really the descendant of the golden dragons? Qin Feiyang was slightly taken aback, then smiled faintly and said, Miss Xiaolan, I can see that you are a smart person. Why do you have to expose some things? When Ren Xiaolan heard this, her face couldn't help but turn pale. It was indeed an impostor. Don't be nervous. If the treasure pavilion really pursues this, just say that you believe us. After all, Little Gold is indeed a 5-clawed golden dragon. Qin Feiyang smiled. I'm not very worried about myself. But young master, when the dragons come looking for you, how are you going to deal with them? Pretending to be dragons is not a trivial matter. Ren Xiaolan said. Let's wait until they come. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. You are really carefree. Ren Xiaolan shook her head. After working in the treasure pavilion for so many years, this was the first time she met such a calm person. Qin Feiyang smiled and looked at the woman in white. The woman in white had already walked around the hall, but she didn't seem to find what she wanted. At this moment, her eyes were full of disappointment. Ren Xiaolan looked at the woman in white suspiciously and asked in a low voice, Young master, do you know her? I don't even know her name. Qin Feiyang shook his head. If you don't even know her name, then why are you helping her like this? Ren Xiaolan was stunned. If he didn't even know her, why would he take such a big risk to help her? Wasn't that stupid? Although I don't know her, she has done me a favor. Of course I have to repay her. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. If you don't know her, How can you repay her? Ren Xiaolan's mind was a little messy, and she couldn't understand these words. Heavens, please tell me, what should I do? Suddenly, the woman in white roared, and her face was full of unwillingness. Qin Feiyang, Ren Xiaolan, and the five-clawed golden dragon were all shocked and hurriedly looked at the woman in white. The woman in white had her back to them, and her hands were tightly clenched together. Drops of blood dripped from the gaps between her hands. Did she suffer some kind of blow? The five-clawed golden dragon murmured. Qin Feiyang and Ren Xiaolan looked at each other with a suspicious look. Great-grandfather, the woman in white murmured and slowly collapsed. She grabbed the counter with both hands and half knelt on the ground. She buried her head and cried bitterly. This scene made Qin Feiyang and the other two a little overwhelmed. That thin back was trembling as she cried. She looked extremely helpless. Did you hear her mention something about great-grandfather? Could it be that some of her relatives have encountered an accident? The five-clawed golden dragon asked. Qin Feiyang and Ren Xiaolan nodded. They also heard the woman in white say the words great-grandfather. Qin Feiyang pondered for a while and slowly walked forward, asking suspiciously, Miss, what are you looking for? The woman in white turned a deaf ear. Ren Xiaolan also stepped forward and looked at the woman in white, saying, Tell me, maybe I can help you. Yes, Miss Xiaolan is from the treasure school. She knows the treasure school better than you. If you can't find it, she can definitely find it. But you have to tell her, so that she can help you. Qin Feiyang persuaded. Why was this woman so stubborn? If it weren't for the fact that she had helped him, he wouldn't have bothered to care about this. Chapter 25-25. Hearing this, the woman in white looked up at Qin Feiyang and the five-clawed golden dragon, then at Ren Xiaolan. She lowered her head and pondered for a moment before letting out a long sigh. She finally opened her heart and stopped crying. She said, Actually, I want to save my great-grandfather. Or did something happen to someone in the family? Qin Feiyang muttered and asked suspiciously, Was your great-grandfather seriously injured? Or was he kidnapped? Neither. The woman in white shook her head. Qin Feiyang was stunned and asked, Then what is it? Great-grandfather, he is reaching the end of his life. The woman in white said with difficulty. Then she closed her eyes, her face full of pain. Reaching the end of his life? Qin Feiyang and the other two looked at each other with a look of realization. It turned out that she was reaching the end of her life. Ren Xiaolan pondered for a moment and said, In this case, only the prolongation pill is useful. How about this? I'll give you a divine-level prolongation pill. It's useless. Great-grandfather has already taken the prolongation pill. The woman in white shook her head. He has already taken it. Ren Xiaolan frowned, shook her head and sighed. Then I can't do anything. For more than a year, I've searched all over the north, hoping to find a treasure that can help great-grandfather extend his life. Actually, I also know that there is no such treasure in the world. Even the treasure pavilion doesn't have it. But I don't want to give up. In my heart, I'm always hoping for a fluke. What if there is? However, every time I'm disappointed. The woman in white hugged her head in pain again. Sigh. Ren Xiaolan sighed. It turned out that she had barged into the 10th floor to find something that could prolong her family's life. The five-clawed golden dragon asked, Then how long can your great-grandfather live? At most, no more than half a year. Great-grandfather is so good to me. My parents passed away when I was young. Grandfather is busy all day and has no time to care about me. It's great-grandfather who brought me up. When I was young, I secretly swore that when I grew up, I would be filial to him. But now, seeing great-grandfather's life coming to an end bit by bit, I'm powerless. I hate myself. The woman in white grabbed her hair. Her facial features twisted because of self-blame. The white-clothed woman's words also evoked Qin Feiyang's past. He also had a great-grandfather, Emperor Hong. Thinking back then, this great-grandfather of his had been extremely cold and indifferent to him. But in the end, he realized that his great-grandfather was actually doing it for his own good. There was also Uncle Yuan, taking care of him, helping him, and silently protecting the Qin clan's bloodline. For this, how much did Yuan Bo pay? Although these two matters were different from the white-clothed woman's situation, They had one thing in common. The elderly were both caring for their descendants. I won't give up. I still have to continue looking. Thank you for listening to me. We'll meet again if fate wills it. The white-clothed woman wiped her tears and stood up. She looked at Qin Feiyang and the other two people and said something. Then she started to walk downstairs. What a pity. She shook her head. Qin Feiyang looked at the back of the woman in white and suddenly smiled. Wait, I can help you. What? The white-clothed woman's body stiffened. She turned to look at Qin Feiyang in shock. Young master, he has already taken the prolongation pill. How can you help? Ren Xiaolan also looked at Qin Feiyang in shock. Not to mention Ren Xiaolan. Even the five-clawed golden dragon was skeptical. Of course, Qin Feiyang had a way. When he broke through to the monarch god level, there was a pill in the pill scripture that could extend one's life. Eternal youth pill. This eternal youth pill was even more amazing than the prolongation pill. It could extend one's life for at least 10,000 years. One pill vein for 10,000 years. 2 pill veins for 20,000 years, and so on. If it was a divine pill, it could extend one's life for 100,000 years. 100,000 years? What kind of concept was that? But this was not the main point. The main point was, even if someone had taken the prolongation pill before, it would still be useful if they took the eternal youth pill now. In other words, these two pills were completely unaffected by each other. But there was one similarity. A person could only take one eternal youth pill in their lifetime. Do you really have a way? The white-clothed woman came back to her senses and looked at Qin Feiyang with great anticipation and nervousness. Of course. If we meet at the city gate, you can tell me. There's no need to cause such a commotion. Qin Feiyang smiled bitterly. What way? The white-clothed woman asked hurriedly. She only heard the word of course, and automatically ignored the rest of the words. Wait a moment. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly and entered the castle. He opened the pill scripture and checked the formula of the eternal youth pill. Subsequently, he entered the medicinal field, found a set of medicinal herbs, and returned to the castle to refine. In a short while, a dark green pill flew out of the pill furnace. It was like a dark green gem, with a dragon-shaped pill aura surrounding it. Immediately after, Qin Feiyang appeared in front of the white-clothed woman with the eternal youth pill, and said with a smile, "Take it." And the white-clothed woman looked at the pill in surprise. Dragon-shaped pill aura. Ren Xiaolan's pupils also shrank slightly. This pill still carried a wave of heat. It was obvious that it had just come out of the furnace. In other words, this person could refine a divine pill. That's not right. Why haven't I heard that he was an alchemist before? And he could even refine a divine pill? And for the white-clothed woman at this moment, being an alchemist or a divine pill was not important. The important thing was this really useful? Qin Feiyang laughed. This pill can extend your lifespan by 100,000 years. Quickly send it to your great-grandfather. 100,000 years. The white-clothed woman's gaze trembled as she looked at Qin Feiyang in disbelief. You don't think that I'm making fun of you, do you? Take it back to your great-grandfather first. If it's useless, come to the Dragon God Palace to find me. I'll let you do whatever you want with me. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. The white-clothed woman still looked skeptical. Qin Feiyang said helplessly, "You don't have any other choice now, right? Just trust me this time." The white-clothed woman pondered for a while, gritted her teeth and said, "Okay, I believe you. I'll go back and give it to my great-grandfather now. Thank you." Qin Feiyang nodded and smiled. "Thank you too." The white-clothed woman looked at Ren Xiaolan and the five-clawed golden dragon, then turned and left quickly. After watching the white-clothed woman leave, the five-clawed golden dragon turned to Qin Feiyang and asked, "Young master, is this pill really useful?" "Of course. If it's useless, would I dare to take it out?" Qin Feiyang was speechless. The five-clawed golden dragon said, "Then why didn't I know that you have such a pill?" "Of course you didn't know, because you only followed me recently." Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes at him. The eternal youth pill had never been refined and no one needed it, so it was never mentioned. Naturally, the five-clawed golden dragon would not know. Ren Xiaolan looked at Qin Feiyang, who was full of confidence, with a strange color in her eyes. This man was really different from the rest. Suddenly, Ren Xiaolan shuddered and hurriedly looked at Qin Feiyang and the five-clawed golden dragon, and said, "Hurry up and leave, otherwise when the dragons come, you will be in big trouble." "Leave?" Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled and said, "Who doesn't know that I am in the Dragon God Palace? Unless I disappear, they will come to find me sooner or later." Ren Xiaolan frowned. "Aren't you worried at all? Is there any use in worrying?" Qin Feiyang smiled faintly and said, "The auction should be starting soon. Take us to the auction house." Ren Xiaolan was speechless, pretending to be dragons and not running. She had never seen such a calm person. Two people and a dragon left the 10th floor and walked downstairs. "Ah, it's them." Immediately, a large number of eyes on the 9th floor turned to Qin Feiyang and the five-clawed golden dragon. The descendant of the golden dragons? Why haven't I heard that among the descendants of the golden dragons, there is a five-clawed golden dragon? Someone secretly curse it. Suddenly, two well-dressed young men stepped forward and blocked in front of Qin Feiyang and the five-clawed golden dragon. Looking at the five-clawed golden dragon, they said, "Excuse me for asking, are you really the descendant of the golden dragons? What does it have to do with you?" The five-clawed golden dragon glared at them, but the two of them were not afraid at all. They smiled and looked at Qin Feiyang and the five-clawed golden dragon. Qin Feiyang was also sizing up the two of them. Now that everyone knew that he was protected by a supreme expert, the two of them looked fearless. It seemed that they were confident. Wait. Suddenly, Qin Feiyang's pupils constricted. The aura that these two people exuded was actually at the 9th heaven realm. But from the looks of it, the two of them were not much older than him. Dragons, we know a thing or two about them. As far as I know, among the descendants of the golden dragons, there is no five-clawed golden dragon. Li Buer, you really live up to your reputation. Your courage is extraordinary. You even dare to impersonate dragons. The two well-dressed young men sized up Qin Feiyang and chuckled. "What? You guys are impersonators?" Ren Xiaolan looked at Qin Feiyang and the five-clawed golden dragon in shock and anger. She had to pretend, because if she didn't pretend, she would be implicated when the time came. "That's right. We're impersonators." Qin Feiyang nodded. "You guys," Ren Xiaolan glared at Qin Feiyang angrily. "They're really impersonators. Outrageous. I thought that this five-clawed golden dragon was really dragons. This bastard really deserves to die. Not only did he pretend to be dragons, but he also has a fearless attitude. Does he really think that he can do whatever he wants with the protection of an omnipotent?" Everyone was indignant. They had never seen such an arrogant person. Ren Xiaolan looked at the crowd around her and said, "You guys should leave quickly." "Leave? There's no need. Where's the auction house?" Qin Feiyang thought to himself. "Why don't you listen to me?" Ren Xiaolan was annoyed. "It's okay. You just have to put on a good show and don't implicate yourself." Qin Feiyang laughed secretly. Ren Xiaolan was speechless. Even now, he still had the mood to care about her. How big was his heart? Ren Xiaolan said, "The auction house is on the 1st floor." "Thank you." Qin Feiyang smiled secretly and walked straight downstairs with the five-clawed golden dragon. "He's really arrogant." The two well-dressed young men saw that Qin Feiyang actually ignored their existence, and a cold light flashed in their eyes. "I'm sorry to have frightened everyone. Don't worry, the treasure pavilion will definitely not sit back and do nothing about Li Buer pretending to be dragons. Now I'll go and report to the steward." Ren Xiaolan looked at everyone and said apologetically before leaving in a hurry. Chapter 25-26. At the same time, in a remote place, there was a lush mountain range. In the mountain range, there were strange peaks and lush vegetation. A clear river meandered through the entire mountain range. There was a simple little courtyard by the river. The courtyard was about 100 meters in size. It was surrounded by a row of wooden fences that were more than a meter tall. There were a few vegetable gardens that were planted with wild vegetables. The wooden building in the courtyard was also built with ordinary wood. It was 3 stories tall and did not have any extravagant decorations. It was extremely simple. In front of the gate of the courtyard, there was a small path paved with gravel that led to the river. At this moment, in front of a stone table in the courtyard, 3 old men sat around the table. 2 of them had white hair and white beards. They had the demeanor of an immortal, and did not have any aura on them. They were like 2 ordinary people. The other old man was even older. He had 1 foot in the grave, and was so skinny that he looked like he would fall with a gust of wind. His face was full of wrinkles, and there was no color at all. On his body, he was wearing very old linen clothes. However, they were very clean. There was a tea set on the stone table. The tea was bubbling, and the fragrance of the tea was intoxicating. The linen old man grabbed the teacup with trembling hands, and took a sip gently. He sighed. I wonder where Schwer went. It's been more than a year, and she hasn't returned. Father, Schwer has grown up and has her own opinions. Furthermore, her cultivation is not weak. Nothing will happen to her. That's right, Father. Don't worry about her. The 2 white-haired old men laughed. I raised her single-handedly. How can I not be worried? Are the 2 of you hiding something from me? The linen old man looked at the 2 of them and frowned. Although the old man was doddering, the words that came out of his mouth carried a bit of dignity. The 2 white-haired old men looked at each other with panic in their eyes. The linen old man looked at the 2 of them and said unhappily, I knew you were hiding something from me. Tell me, where did Schwer go? Nothing. Before the 2 white-haired old men could finish, the linen old man was furious and shouted, I want to hear the truth. Cough, cough. Perhaps because he was angry and hurt himself, the old man coughed violently after he finished speaking. His face was paler than before. Father, please calm down. We'll talk. Schwer went to find a way to prolong your life. The 2 white-haired old men hurriedly stepped forward and consoled the old man in sackcloth. Life extension. The old man in sackcloth couldn't help but fall silent. After a long time, he gently pushed the 2 white-haired old men away and sighed. I've already taken the life prolongation pill. Is there still a way to prolong my life? We know. Schwer must know as well. But she didn't want you to die. We've tried to stop her, but you know her temper. We can't stop her. The 2 old men in white sighed. Sigh. The old man let out a long sigh and said, Both of you put down what you were doing and came back to accompany me for more than a year. Why don't the 2 of you go back first and come back when I'm about to die? Hearing this, the 2 white-haired old men felt their hearts ache. Father, what are you talking about? In the past, the 2 of us have always been adventuring outside, and have never truly accompanied you or cared about you. Every time we think about this, we only feel guilty towards you. Please let us accompany you through this period of time. The 2 white-haired old men lowered their heads, their faces filled with self-blame and guilt. Yes, there were many people in this world like them. When their parents were still alive, nothing mattered. They didn't even have the patience to sit down and talk to their parents. It was only when they were about to lose them that they realized how much they had missed out on in their lives. However, it was too late to realize it now, because what they had lost could never be found again. The old man in sackcloth chuckled hoarsely. I've never blamed the 2 of you. A man's ambition is to travel far. Thank you, Father. Please let us stay. We really want to accompany you. As for the matters in our hands, we've already taken care of them. You don't have to worry. The 2 of them said. The old man in sackcloth looked at the 2 of them and nodded with a smile. All right, hurry and bring Schwer back. It's rare for a family to be reunited. Let us spend this period of time happily. Yes. The 2 of them nodded with tears in their eyes. Swoosh. However, at this moment, a white-clothed woman in ragged clothes descended outside the courtyard. She was in a sorry state. Schwer. The 2 white-haired old men hurriedly stood up and looked at the white-clothed woman. The old man in sackcloth also grabbed the walking stick beside him and stood up slowly. His turbid eyes were filled with joy. Great-grandfather. The moment the white-clothed woman saw the old man in sackcloth, she hurriedly pushed open the courtyard door and ran over. Lass, everyone has to die. Don't be too sad. Actually, I'm already very happy, because I have the 2 of you to accompany me when I'm about to leave. The old man in sackcloth grabbed the white-clothed woman's hand, and his face was filled with love. Great-grandfather. When the white-clothed woman heard this, tears streamed down her face. Swear, don't cry. Great-grandfather will be sad when he sees this. The two white-haired old men stepped forward and said. However, between their brows, there was also a sense of sadness that could not be dissolved. Yes, yes, yes. Don't cry. Great-grandfather, grandfather, second grandfather, we should laugh. The white-clothed woman wiped away her tears and looked at the three of them with a smile. Yes, we should be more open-minded and take things lightly. The old man in sackcloth nodded. No, no, no. The white-clothed woman waved her hand and looked at the old man in sackcloth. She grabbed the old man's hand and said happily, Great-grandfather, I've found a way to extend your life. A way to extend my life? The old man in sackcloth was stunned. The two white-haired old men were also stunned. The old man in sackcloth rubbed the white-clothed woman's forehead and said with a smile, Lass, you only know how to make great-grandfather happy. I don't. This time it's real. The white-clothed woman hurriedly took out the eternal youth elixir and handed it to the old man in sackcloth. What elixir is this? The three of them looked at the eternal youth elixir suspiciously. I don't know either. But the person who gave me this elixir told me that this elixir can extend my life by 100,000 years. Great-grandfather, please take it, the white-clothed woman said. What? 100,000 years? Shwe. Now is not the time for jokes. The two white-haired old men trembled and looked at the white-clothed woman as they said, Grandfather, second grandfather. I'm not joking. Although I don't know if he's telling the truth, I'm willing to believe him. Great-grandfather, please take it. Perhaps it really will work. The white-clothed woman looked at the old man in sackcloth anxiously. Lass, great-grandfather has already taken the life extension elixir. How can this elixir be useful? Don't be fooled by others. The old man in sackcloth said. Just take it. What if it really works? The white-clothed woman was very anxious. The old man in sackcloth looked at the two white-haired old men. Father, it's better if you don't take it. What if the person who gave this elixir to Schwer has bad intentions? I'm also worried. The two of them transmitted their voices. Hearing this, the old man in sackcloth looked at the anxious white-clothed woman again, and finally nodded with a smile. All right, great-grandfather will take it. Father! The two white-haired old men hurriedly called out. Schwer went through untold hardships to find this elixir. I can't let her down. Even if it's poisonous, I don't care. The old man in sackcloth grabbed the eternal youth elixir and put it into his mouth. The white-clothed woman looked at the old man in sackcloth with anticipation. The two white-haired old men looked nervous. Boom! Not long after the old man in sackcloth took the eternal youth elixir, an incomparably majestic life force suddenly exploded in the old man's body. Then, a miraculous scene appeared. The aura of death on the old man's body quickly dissipated. Traces of blood quickly returned to his wrinkled face. Even his thin and frail body seemed to have become more plump. It really works. The two white-clothed old men were astonished. The white-clothed woman's face also showed a trace of surprise. As the person involved, the old man in sackcloth felt it most vividly. He could clearly feel that every part of his body was changing, especially his bones. The bones in his body were originally old and rotten, but now, they were slowly becoming stronger. Moreover, his essence, energy, and spirit were completely renewed. It was as if he had been reborn. His entire body was incomparably comfortable. Unbelievable. Schwer, who gave you this elixir? The two white-haired old men exclaimed as they looked at the white-clothed woman. However, the white-clothed woman didn't hear them, because now, she was completely immersed in joy. About 100 breaths later, the majestic life force had been completely absorbed by the old man in sackcloth. Although his appearance didn't change much, his old body was no longer skinny and frail. He even vaguely looked a little stronger. His turbid eyes were now bright and full of vigor. There were even wisps of sharpness. His body was also completely different from before. It was filled with a powerful force. However, looking at himself, the old man in sackcloth found it hard to believe. Was this a dream? He felt that his old body wasn't any worse than a young man's. Suddenly, he raised his arm and punched the stone table in front of him. Father! The two white-haired old men were shocked and hurriedly went forward to stop him. However, in the next moment, a scene that made them go wild with joy appeared. They saw that the old man in sackcloth's punch had directly shattered the stone table. When they looked at the old man in sackcloth, they saw that he was completely fine. The white-clothed woman looked at the shattered stone table and asked, "Great-grandfather, how do you feel?" "Great. I've never felt better. Now, I feel like I've returned to the time when I was young. My body is filled with strength." The old man in sackcloth smiled. Even his voice was no longer hoarse and was filled with strength. When the white-clothed woman heard this, she immediately threw herself into the old man's arms and cried loudly. And this was tears of joy. The two white-haired old men couldn't help but cry when they saw this scene. Chapter 25-27. What are you doing? It's such a joyous occasion. Why are you crying? On the contrary, the old man in sackcloth was the calmest. After all, she had been to the gates of hell, so her state of mind would definitely change. Hearing this, the two white-haired old men wiped away their tears and smiled. "Shui, who gave you this pill? Hurry up and tell us. If there's a chance, we must thank him properly." The two of them looked at the girl and asked. The girl in white said, "From what everyone is saying, his name seems to be Li Buer." "What? Li Buer?" The two white-haired old men were shocked. Seeing their reaction, the old man in sackcloth asked, "Do you know him?" "Yes, he's a disciple of the Dragon God Palace. And he has the protection of a paragon. He's a bit strong-willed." "I really didn't expect it to be him," the two of them said. "Since he's a disciple of the Dragon God Palace, you must take good care of him. Also, if there's a chance, invite him to our home. I want to thank him in person," the old man in sackcloth said. "All right," the two of them nodded. The girl in white suddenly thought of something, looked at the two white-haired old men and said, "Grandfather, second grandfather, he might be in trouble right now." "What trouble?" The two of them looked at her suspiciously. "When I was in the treasure pavilion, I wanted to enter the 10th floor, but I was stopped by the people there." The woman in white explained the situation in a simple and clear manner. Five-clawed golden dragon? Pretending to be dragons? The two of them were shocked, but when they regained their senses, they smiled bitterly and said, "As expected of this kid, Holy Dragon City. Did you hear? This Li Buer did something earth-shattering again." "What is it?" "Pretending to be dragons." "What? He even dares to pretend to be dragons. This guy is really as bold as the rumors say. Pretending to be dragons is a capital offense. This time he's probably angered the dragons. I wonder what will happen to him. To be honest, I quite admire him. Because among the younger generation, he is the only one who dares to openly challenge the dragons." Everyone was discussing animatedly, and a storm was brewing in the city. It was the same for the treasure pavilion. The auction had already begun. However, everyone's eyes were locked on a certain spot in the front row. Surprisingly, a young man was sitting there. It was Qin Feiyang. As for the five-clawed golden dragon, it shrunk to the size of a palm and lay on Qin Feiyang's shoulder, taking a nap. Although its body had shrunk, and it had retracted its dragon might, it was still dazzling. "Now let's auction a supreme-grade divine artifact. The starting price is 50 million, and there is no upper limit." On the auction stage, an old man was holding an auction in full swing. In a room on the first floor. "No way, he even dares to impersonate dragons?" A chubby middle-aged fatso was sitting beside the coffee table. He looked at Ren Xiaolan, who was standing opposite him, and said in surprise, "Yes." Ren Xiaolan nodded and blamed herself. "It's all my fault. I didn't see through it immediately, and even let them enter the 10th floor. This is not your responsibility. You don't have to blame yourself." The middle-aged fatso was the manager of the treasure pavilion in Holy Dragon City. He wore a gorgeous robe, had a broad body, and a fat head with big ears. A normal chair wouldn't be able to accommodate his body. "Thank you, manager." Ren Xiaolan breathed a sigh of relief. The middle-aged fatso pondered for a while, and looked at Ren Xiaolan. "Go and keep an eye on him now. But remember, don't do anything offensive." "Can't offend." "Why is that?" Ren Xiaolan was suspicious. "Didn't you mention the rumors about him?" He even dared to kill the island master of the Dragon God Palace. Moreover, he has the support of the Hall Master of the Law Enforcement Hall. Can we afford to offend such a person? You just need to keep an eye on him and let the dragons settle this matter. The middle-aged fatso said. I see. Ren Xiaolan suddenly understood and nodded. I understand, I'll go now. With that, she left the room and walked toward the auction house. The middle-aged fatso pondered for a while and also took out the image crystal. Auction house. Ren Xiaolan walked quickly to Qin Feiyang and said with a smile, Young master, please follow me to the VIP room. VIP room? Qin Feiyang was stunned. Yes. Our auction house has a total of 3 floors. This is the lowest floor, and the 2 floors above are the VIP rooms. Ren Xiaolan said. Okay. Qin Feiyang thought for a while and nodded with a smile. After Qin Feiyang left with Ren Xiaolan, the people around suddenly became restless. He was actually invited to the VIP room? Isn't the treasure pavilion afraid of offending the dragons? What are you thinking? Do you think the treasure pavilion really treats him as a VIP? You can't even understand this. I really admire you. Let me tell you. On the surface, the treasure pavilion is inviting him to the VIP room. But in reality, they are keeping an eye on him and waiting for the dragons to come. After all, this Libuer has an ultimate powerhouse by his side, and the treasure pavilion doesn't want to offend him. I see. Looks like there will be a good show to watch later. Upstairs in a VIP room, Ren Xiaolan pushed open the door and walked in with Qin Feiyang. The VIP room wasn't big. The decorations weren't very luxurious either. There were 3 chairs and a coffee table. In the corner, there were a few pots of green plants. In front of them was a transparent floor-to-ceiling window, and they could clearly see the auction stage below and hear the sounds outside. Young master, please take a seat. Ren Xiaolan pointed at the chair next to the coffee table and smiled, then squatted down to make tea. Qin Feiyang sat on the chair, glanced at Ren Xiaolan, and smiled faintly. Inviting me to the VIP room for no reason? There must be something going on. Young master is really a smart person. Ren Xiaolan didn't hide anything and slowly told him the steward's purpose. Dragons, Qin Feiyang murmured, looked at Ren Xiaolan and smiled. I have a doubt in my heart. Can you help me solve it? Young master, please speak. Ren Xiaolan was stunned. You're from the treasure pavilion, so logically speaking, you should keep these things a secret from me. But why did you tell me without hiding anything? Qin Feiyang said. Ren Xiaolan was slightly startled and asked, Young master, do you suspect that I have ulterior motives? Qin Feiyang said, I don't know, so I hope that you can help me solve this doubt. Ren Xiaolan pondered for a while and said, To be honest, I admire you very much because you dared to kill the island master of the Dragon God Palace and humiliated the 10th elder. And then, Qin Feiyang said. Ren Xiaolan looked up at Qin Feiyang for a moment, took a deep breath, lowered her head, and continued to make tea. She whispered, I also hate dragons. We humans shouldn't be ruled by a group of beasts. Qin Feiyang nodded in realization, and then didn't speak again, looking at the auction outside. Because this sentence was already convincing enough. Next is the exciting moment, and also the moment that many alchemists are looking forward to the most. On the auction stage, the old man took out an iron box and slowly opened it. A cluster of alchemy fire slowly appeared. Waves of heat rolled. The auction house immediately became like a big furnace. 4th grade divine fire. Let's not talk nonsense and start directly. The starting price is 10 divine crystals, and there's no limit. As the old man's straightforward words fell, the auction house immediately fell into a frenzy of bidding. The starting price is 10 divine crystals? Qin Feiyang was stunned. Although there was no upper limit, wasn't it a little too casual to lower the price by 10 divine crystals? Young master, there's something you don't know. Every once in a while, our treasure pavilion will auction a 4th grade divine fire, or a 4th grade divine furnace. But it's not to make money, Ren Xiaolan said. What do you mean? Qin Feiyang looked at her suspiciously. As an alchemist who can refine divine pills, sir, I believe you know better than me the value of a 4th grade divine fire and a 4th grade divine furnace. Ren Xiaolan said. Yes. A fourth-grade divine fire and a fourth-grade divine furnace is basically a priceless treasure. Qin Feiyang nodded. That's right. So, our treasure pavilion usually auctions third-grade divine fire and a third-grade divine furnace. Fourth-grade divine fire and above are basically not auctioned. Ren Xiaolan smiled. Not auctioning? Then why does your treasure pavilion keep these alchemy fires and furnaces? Qin Feiyang was suspicious and suddenly remembered the situation on the 10th floor. He frowned and said, They're all for the dragons. Not all of them. If someone wants a fourth-grade divine furnace and a fourth-grade divine furnace and a fourth-grade divine fire and above, they can find our steward and exchange for it with treasures of equal value. Ren Xiaolan said. I see. Qin Feiyang nodded and asked, Then what do you mean when you said it's not to make money? Every once in a while, a fourth-grade divine fire or a fourth-grade divine furnace will be auctioned. In fact, it's a special benefit to repay everyone's support for the treasure pavilion. Even if the final price is really only 10 divine crystals, our treasure pavilion will complete the transaction without hesitation. Of course, this kind of thing has never happened before. Ren Xiaolan smiled. Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled. That was for sure. Once a fourth-grade divine fire and a fourth-grade divine furnace and above were put up for auction, there would definitely be a mad scramble. Naturally, it would be impossible for them to be sold at the price of 10 divine crystals. In fact, in the end, this was a gimmick to win people's hearts. The treasure pavilion was so smart. How could they make a loss? If Sir wants a divine fire and a furnace, you can actually find the steward to make a private transaction, because it's too much of a waste of time in the auction house. Ren Xiaolan suggested. It's indeed a waste of time, but I don't have treasures of the same value. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. Sir, you're too modest. Ren Xiaolan shook her head. Not only did he have supreme experts protecting him, but he could also refine divine pills. How could such a person not have treasures of the same value as a fourth-grade divine fire and a furnace? However, after working in the treasure pavilion for so many years, she already knew what to say and what not to say. There were some things that could not be exposed. Not long ago, on the 10th floor, she had already broken a taboo by pointing out that the 5-clawed golden dragons were pretending to be dragons. So she could not do it again. 50 billion. 51 billion. The price of the fourth-grade divine fire quickly soared by more than 50 billion. Qin Feiyang glanced at the people present and smiled faintly. 100 billion. Li Boer. He's not an alchemist. Why is he here? He even raised the price to 100 billion. Do you have too much money to burn? Qin Feiyang just casually opened his mouth, but the whole place fell silent. There was a trace of fear and hesitation in everyone's eyes. Chapter 25-28. They were afraid because of Qin Feiyang's usual strength and the supreme expert behind him. Moreover, he even dared to impersonate dragons and didn't run away. Instead, he sat in the auction house openly. Was such a person someone they could offend? They were hesitant because it wasn't easy for them to wait until the auction of the fourth-grade divine fire. It would be a pity to give up. After some internal struggle, everyone finally chose to give up on bidding. Although this person impersonating dragons would definitely bring about a disaster, no one knew what would happen in the end. Therefore, it was better not to offend this person for the time being. The old man on the auction platform was also a little surprised by the result. Why did everyone give up when this person opened his mouth? The auction was a fair competition. Was there a need to be so afraid? Although this was a reward for the benefits given out by everyone, it was too much of a loss to trade for 100 billion divine crystals. 100 billion? Is there anyone else who wants to raise the price? The old man looked around the auction house and asked unwillingly, but no one responded. This made the old man feel helpless. Ren Xiaolan covered her mouth and laughed. Young master, you're quite influential. Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled. This result was not out of his expectations. And this was the effect he wanted, so that he wouldn't waste the divine crystals. The old man said loudly, Since no one wants to raise the price, then I announce 200 billion. However, before the old man finished speaking, A faint voice sounded from the VIP room opposite. 200 billion? He knows it's Li Buer, but he still wants to raise the price? And he's doubling the price. Interesting. Everyone was slightly stunned and looked at the VIP room in unison. The old man on the auction platform also faintly smiled. I knew it. With so many people here, there must be a few who weren't afraid of Li Bu. This voice is a little familiar, Qin Feiyang whispered, and also looked at the VIP room opposite. It's him, Ren Xiaolan said. Who? Qin Feiyang asked. Do you still remember the two young men in luxurious clothes who exposed your impersonation of dragons on the 9th floor? This person is one of them, Ren Xiaolan said. It seems to be them. Qin Feiyang nodded and remembered. He called out a bit at this time, and even doubled it just like you. He's clearly provoking you, Ren Xiaolan said. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly as he looked at the auction stage and said, 201 million. 400 billion. The luxuriously dressed youth in the opposite VIP room spoke without hesitation. 500 billion. Qin Feiyang said again. 1 trillion. The voice on the other side sounded again. Qin Feiyang's eyes flickered. When the price was raised to 201 billion, the other party didn't hesitate to raise it to 400 billion. Next, he raised it to 500 billion, and the other party doubled it to 1 trillion. The other party was indeed provoking him. I've finally met a tough opponent. I'd like to see how this guy ends up. Everyone looked at Qin Feiyang's VIP room with schadenfreude. Ren Xiaolan glanced at the opposite VIP room and looked at Qin Feiyang, saying, Young master, a tree needs a layer of bark to live, and a man needs a breath of breath. But before Ren Xiaolan finished speaking, Qin Feiyang said, I give up. What? He actually gave up. Ren Xiaolan was stunned. The people around the auction house were also stunned. They thought that this person would continue to compete, but they didn't expect him to give up so easily. In the opposite VIP room, the two luxuriously dressed youths also looked at each other. What was going on? They had just started, and he actually gave up? Li Buer, you and your accomplice have done so many earth-shattering things. You shouldn't be short of divine crystals, right? You're not playing anymore? Isn't that too boring? The two of them spoke with a hint of sarcasm. Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows. Accomplice? Earth-shattering things? Not short of divine crystals? Why did it sound like there was a hidden meaning in their words? Could it be that these two people knew that he was the one who ransacked the various city lord mansions in the north? But how is that possible? Is there anyone else who wants to bid? The old man looked around the auction house and focused on the VIP room where Qin Feiyang was. But no one spoke. Qin Feiyang ignored them and looked at the VIP room opposite, his eyes flashing with cold light. Seeing that Qin Feiyang didn't speak for a long time, the old man announced the result. Qin Feiyang also retracted his gaze and stood up. Ren Xiaolan was slightly stunned and hurriedly asked, Young master, where are you going? Back to the Dragon God Palace. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. You're going back now? Young master, did you come to our treasure pavilion for the 4th grade divine fire? Ren Xiaolan asked. You can say that. Qin Feiyang smiled. Ren Xiaolan nodded in realization and asked, But if you leave now, how am I going to explain it to the manager? Qin Feiyang pondered for a while and said, That's good. Take me to see your manager. What do you want to do? Young master, the manager was forced to do this. After all, you're pretending to be dragons in our treasure pavilion. As the person in charge of the treasure pavilion, he must give the dragons an explanation. Ren Xiaolan hurriedly said, thinking that Qin Feiyang was going to hurt the manager of the treasure pavilion. Don't be nervous. I know the treasure pavilion's situation. I won't make things difficult for him. I'm just going to talk to him about a business deal. Qin Feiyang smiled. That's good. Ren Xiaolan heaved a sigh of relief, got up, and led Qin Feiyang to the first floor. After a while, the two of them arrived in front of a door. Dong! Ren Xiaolan reached out and gently knocked on the door. Come in. A voice sounded from inside. Ren Xiaolan pushed the door open and led Qin Feiyang in. The manager of the treasure pavilion sat at the desk and glanced at Ren Xiaolan. When he saw that Qin Feiyang was behind Ren Xiaolan, his expression changed immediately. He hurriedly got up and greeted them. Brother Li, you've graced my treasure pavilion with your presence. I hope Brother Li will forgive me for not going out to welcome you. He looked extremely nervous. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly and looked at Ren Xiaolan. I'll talk to the manager in private first. This? Ren Xiaolan looked at the manager of the treasure pavilion. The manager waved his hand and said, Go out and wait. Ren Xiaolan turned and walked out, closing the door behind her. Brother Li, please take a seat. The manager of the treasure pavilion invited Qin Feiyang to sit at the coffee table and served him the best tea leaves. There's no need to go through so much trouble. You don't have to be so nervous. I'm just here to talk to you about a business deal. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. Business deal? The manager of the treasure pavilion was stunned and asked in confusion. What business deal? Qin Feiyang said. I need a divine-level alchemy fire above the 4th grade. Alchemy fire? The manager of the treasure pavilion was a little surprised. He looked at Qin Feiyang and said, May I ask if you're an alchemist? Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded. The manager of the treasure pavilion was very surprised. This person was famous for his arrogance, but he didn't expect him to be an alchemist. Why hadn't he heard of him before? Actually, whether I'm an alchemist or not doesn't have much to do with the alchemy fire I'm buying, right? There's no rule in this world that says you have to be an alchemist to buy alchemy fire, right? Qin Feiyang said faintly. Yes. I've offended you. Please forgive me, Brother Li. The manager of the treasure pavilion was stunned and quickly smiled obsequiously. Qin Feiyang said, Then name your price. This, the manager of the treasure pavilion hesitated and said with a smile. To be honest, Brother Li, we don't sell alchemy fires above the 4th grade. We only exchange them with treasures of the same value. Of the same value? Qin Feiyang frowned. Of course. For you, Brother Li, we can relax the conditions. The manager of the treasure pavilion said again. Why? Qin Feiyang looked at him in surprise. The treasure pavilion is just a business place. We don't want too much trouble. The manager of the treasure pavilion said it very carefully and tactfully, but the meaning was obvious. He hoped that Qin Feiyang wouldn't cause trouble in the treasure pavilion and bring trouble to the treasure pavilion. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly and said, To be honest, I really admire the way the treasure pavilion does things. It's just doing business. Brother Li, you're too kind. How about this? I'll give you a cluster of 4th grade alchemy fire. Take it as a gift from the treasure pavilion. The manager of the treasure pavilion smiled. Give it to me? Qin Feiyang smiled and shook his head. I don't dare to accept such an expensive gift. Moreover, I need more than one cluster. How many do you want? The manager of the treasure pavilion asked. 3 clusters of 4th grade alchemy fire. 3 clusters of 5th grade alchemy fire. If there are 6th grade or 7th grade ones, I'll accept them all. Also, I want an alchemy furnace. The higher the grade, the better. Qin Feiyang said. So many? The manager of the treasure pavilion was shocked. It's a little too much, but I believe it's not difficult for the treasure pavilion. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. This? The manager of the treasure pavilion hesitated and said, How about this, Brother Li, go back first. I'll ask the chief pavilion master for his opinion. I'll contact you then. Okay. Qin Feiyang nodded, opened the altar and walked up. After Qin Feiyang disappeared, the manager of the treasure pavilion sneered. He looked at the closed door and said, Ren Xiaolan, come in. Ren Xiaolan had been waiting outside the door. When she heard that, she immediately opened the door and walked to the manager of the treasure pavilion. The manager of the treasure pavilion asked, You've been watching him for so long. Do you know that he's an alchemist? Yes. Ren Xiaolan nodded and recalled what happened on the 10th floor not long ago. She said, He seems to be able to refine elixirs. What? He can refine elixirs? The manager of the treasure pavilion stood up suddenly, his face full of shock. At that time on the 10th floor, he did take out a freshly refined elixir, but I don't know if he refined it himself. Because when he took out the elixir, he went to the space treasure. Ren Xiaolan said. Hearing that, the manager of the treasure pavilion slowly returned to his seat. He pondered for a while and shook his head. He probably didn't refine it. How so? Ren Xiaolan was suspicious. He's just an immortal. How can he refine elixirs of this level? Moreover, we've never heard him say that he's an alchemist before. I think it must be the immortal by his side who helped him refine it. The manager of the treasure pavilion said self-righteously. Ren Xiaolan nodded and asked, "Then why did he look for you?" "It's really funny. He actually asked me for 3 clusters of 4th grade elixir fire, 3 clusters of 5th grade elixir fire, and 3 clusters of 6th grade elixir fire." The manager of the treasure pavilion sneered. Chapter 25-29. Sure enough, it's for the elixir fire. Ren Xiaolan mumbled and asked, "What did you say?" She had already thought of this when she heard Qin Feiyang say that he wanted to look for the steward. Of course I wouldn't agree to it. I just made up an excuse and told him to get lost. The treasure pavilion steward said lightly. Aren't you afraid of angering him? Ren Xiaolan was surprised. He can't even protect himself by pretending to be dragons. What am I afraid of? Just wait and see. His death date is not far away. The treasure pavilion steward sneered. Ren Xiaolan smiled and didn't say anything else. She looked at the treasure pavilion steward and said, "If there's nothing else, I'll get back to work." "Okay." The treasure pavilion steward nodded. Ren Xiaolan left the room and turned to close the door. There seemed to be a hint of worry in her eyes. At the same time, in the room, the treasure pavilion steward took a sip of tea and sneered. "Do you really think I'll buy your elixir fire? You're really naive and ridiculous." After saying that, he leaned on the chair and crossed his legs. He closed his eyes and shook his legs constantly, looking like he was floating in the air. However, he didn't know. All of this was seen by everyone. And this person was Qin Feiyang. In fact, he didn't leave before. When he was about to be teleported away by the altar, he entered the ancient castle and stayed in the room. So, he had heard every single word that the treasure pavilion's manager had said. Fire Lotus looked at the steward in the image and asked curiously, "Qin Dage, how do you know he's lying to you?" "It's very simple. As a businessman, if he really wants to do business, he will definitely take the initiative to establish a contract with the other party before he leaves to facilitate communication. And before this, although he made it sound very nice, he didn't mention a single word about establishing a contract. This means that he's just being perfunctory. Of course, if he's just being perfunctory, I won't be angry. But his attitude and the words he said to Ren Xiaolan are not just perfunctory, but also a kind of arrogant contempt. He thinks that in front of him, everyone else is a fool and he's the smartest." Qin Feiyang said lightly. Fire Lotus smiled. "Then how do you plan to deal with him? The show has to be played one step at a time. Take it slow." Qin Feiyang smiled and waved his hand, dispelling the image. Then, he drove the ancient castle away from the treasure pavilion. Boom. But at this moment, a terrifying dragon might descend it. The people entering and exiting the treasure hall were immediately startled as they raised their heads to look at the sky above the treasure hall. A middle-aged man was standing in the air. He was about 1.8 meters tall and had an imposing appearance. He wore a dazzling golden robe. A 5-clawed golden dragon was embroidered on his clothes. "Li Buer, come out now." The golden-robed middle-aged man looked down at the treasure pavilion and shouted. Sure enough, he has come to settle accounts with Li Buer. But who is this guy? Looks like it's very impressive. The crowd mumbled as they sized up the golden-robed middle-aged man. Tap tap. Along with the sound of hurried footsteps, the manager of the treasure pavilion ran out and hurriedly went up to greet him respectfully. "Greetings, my lord. Where is Li Buer?" the golden-robed middle-aged man asked. The manager of the treasure pavilion smiled apologetically. "He has already returned to the Dragon God Palace." "Returned to the Dragon God Palace?" The golden-robed middle-aged man raised his eyebrows and said angrily, "Didn't I tell you to keep an eye on him? I can't do anything about it. After all, he has supreme experts protecting him. I can't stop him even if I want to." The manager of the treasure pavilion complained tearfully. "Useless trash." The golden-robed middle-aged man glared at the manager of the treasure pavilion and opened an altar. The manager of the treasure pavilion of the Holy Dragon City is actually bowing down to a junior of the dragons. What an eye-opener. At this moment, Qin Feiyang appeared in the crowd below and looked at the manager of the treasure pavilion with a faint smile. Li Bua, when did he come? The people around immediately looked at Qin Feiyang. Why is he still here? The manager of the treasure pavilion lowered his head and looked at Qin Feiyang with a stunned expression. He then transmitted his voice. Brotherly, please don't cause trouble here. Why? Qin Feiyang asked secretly. The manager of the treasure pavilion said anxiously. Didn't we agree to not bring trouble to the treasure pavilion? Did we? Why don't I remember? Qin Feiyang smiled mockingly and ignored the manager of the treasure pavilion. He looked at the golden-robed middle-aged man and asked, What's the matter? The manager of the treasure pavilion was anxious. What did this mean? Why did his attitude change in the blink of an eye? You're Li Buar? The golden-robed middle-aged man sized up Qin Feiyang and asked. Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded. The golden-robed middle-aged man said, I'm the patriarch of the Golden Dragons. The patriarch of the Golden Dragons. I didn't expect him to come to the treasure pavilion personally. After knowing the identity of the golden-robed middle-aged man, everyone's eyes were filled with fear. So it's the patriarch. It's an honor to meet you. Qin Feiyang cupped his hands and smiled. Don't play dumb with me. Let the five-clawed golden dragon come out immediately. I'd like to see when you gave birth to such a descendant. The patriarch of the golden dragons snorted. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly and said, Little Gold, come, let him take a look. I'm not a pet. What are you looking at? The five-clawed golden dragon complained in dissatisfaction, but it also flew out from Qin Feiyang's wrist and floated beside Qin Feiyang. The patriarch of the golden dragons looked up and down at the five-clawed golden dragon, and his eyes were fixed on the five-clawed golden dragon's fifth dragon claw. His eyes suddenly shone. It was really a five-clawed golden dragon. One had to know. In the entire Golden Dragon clan, only he and the ancestral dragon had a fifth dragon claw. Even his true descendant did not have a fifth dragon claw. But now, a golden dragon that came out of nowhere actually had 5 dragon claws? This was too unbelievable. In other words, the five-clawed golden dragon's bloodline power was even purer than his true descendants. Are you done looking? The five-clawed golden dragon looked at the patriarch of the golden dragons impatiently. The golden dragons took a deep breath and asked, Where are you from? Related to you? The five-clawed golden dragon raised his eyebrows. The patriarch of the golden dragons said angrily, All the dragons in the world are related to us dragons. If I ask you to answer, then answer. This emperor only listens to the young master. If the young master asks me to answer, then I will answer. As for you, sorry, I'm not familiar with you. After the five-clawed golden dragon finished speaking, he returned to Qin Feiyang's wrist. The patriarch of the golden dragon's face darkened in an instant. Li Buer, do you know that impersonating dragons is a capital offense? The patriarch of the golden dragons pointed his spear at Qin Feiyang again. Impersonating dragons is a capital offense? Then I'd like to ask, what crime is it for you dragons to impersonate us humans? Qin Feiyang laughed. The patriarch of the golden dragons frowned and said, When have we ever impersonated you humans? You dragons are all in human form. Aren't you impersonating us humans? Qin Feiyang said. Impersonating human form is impersonating us humans? The patriarch of the golden dragons was angry and amused. How could there be such an unreasonable person? Since even you guys aren't impersonating us, then how can Xiao Jin be considered impersonating us? Could it be that he's not a dragon god? Qin Feiyang said. Hearing this, everyone couldn't help but mutter. The five-clawed golden dragon was a dragon god. Since he was a dragon god, then he should be considered a dragon. In this way, the five-clawed golden dragon really wasn't impersonating him, because he was a dragon himself. The patriarch of the golden dragons shouted, Although he is a dragon god, he has not been recognized by us dragons. Without recognition, he is not a member of us dragons. Wait, there's some contradiction in your words. Since you said that Xiao Jin is not a dragon, then why did you say that all the dragons in the world are related to you dragons? Qin Feiyang looked at the patriarch of the golden dragons suspiciously. For a moment, the patriarch of the Golden Dragons was at a loss for words. If I understand correctly, the name Dragons is a collective name for the Dragon God clan. The dragons in the world belong to the dragons. Just like us humans, we are collectively known as the human race. Whether it's the divine land, the 4 major domains, or other places, as long as you are a human, you are a member of the human race. Or is my understanding wrong? In front of you, only the dragons of Divine Dragon Island are considered dragons? If that's the case, then where do you place the dragons that are scattered outside? Patriarch, whether you are a human or a dragon, you have to be reasonable, don't you think so? Qin Feiyang said with a faint smile. The patriarch of the Golden Dragons was extremely angry. How could this mouth be so powerful? His words made him unable to refute. Qin Feiyang coughed and said, Patriarch, don't get me wrong. I don't mean to offend you. I'm just being reasonable. The Golden Dragon tribe leader said angrily. So you're saying that if I punish you today, I'll be the one being unreasonable? I don't know if you are reasonable or not, but I believe that justice is in people's hearts. Qin Feiyang said with a smile. The Golden Dragon tribe's leader was so angry that he laughed. What a sharp tongue. He said, It doesn't matter if you're being reasonable or not. You have to give me an explanation today. What explanation do you want? Qin Feiyang asked. You have 2 choices. First, let the 5-clawed golden dragon go to Divine Dragon Island with me and promise to cut off all ties with the 5-clawed golden dragon. I will pretend that this never happened. Second, you can continue to be arrogant, but you and the 5-clawed golden dragon will be finished. I know that you have a supreme expert protecting you, but a half-step invincible realm expert is nothing in front of us dragons. As for that young man, I'm afraid he can't come to help you in time. The golden dragon's eyes flashed coldly. You are so confident. It seems that you have come prepared. Who else is there? Come out. Qin Feiyang smiled and glanced at the void. Whoosh. As Qin Feiyang's voice fell, 2 figures appeared beside the golden dragons. It was the white-clothed woman and the 10th elder. Greetings, Patriarch Dragon. Everyone present immediately knelt on the ground and bowed respectfully. At the scene, only Qin Feiyang was standing, looking at the white-clothed woman and the 10th elder. Qin Feiyang said with a smile. Even the 2 of you are here. What an honor. Say yes. Although what you said is reasonable, and the 5-clawed golden dragon is a dragon, it is undeniable that he pretended to be the son of the golden dragons. In the end, you are still guilty. The white-clothed woman looked at Qin Feiyang and said. Chapter 2530. Qin Feiyang looked at the woman in white and said, So, I have no choice? Yes. The woman in white nodded. Pretending to be the son of the golden dragons, what other choice do you have? Also, you were in the wrong in the first place, but instead of admitting your mistake in time, you even talked big and said a lot of reasons to defend yourself. Li Bu Er, are you such a hypocrite? Suddenly, 2 sneers sounded in the crowd. Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows. This voice. He immediately looked in the direction of the voice and saw 2 young men in luxurious clothes standing not far away, looking at him with a cold smile. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed with a cold light. He had no impression of these 2 people, which meant that he had never seen them before. He had never seen them before, but he kept provoking him? Was there something wrong with his brain? Hearing this Li Bu Er is really a hypocrite. When the crowd heard the words of the 2 young men in luxurious clothes, they pondered for a while and nodded. Qin Feiyang was speechless. Were these people brainless? Were they so easily incited? The other party was the evil dragons as humans. Shouldn't they be united against the outside world? Besides, he tried his best to deal with the dragons, and even fought a bloody battle with the dragon sovereign and the other ancestral dragons in the internal sea. Why? Wasn't it to overthrow the rule of the dragons and let humans be the masters? But what did these people do? Nothing was done. It didn't matter if they didn't do it. But could they shut up? But they didn't shut their mouths. They only knew how to join in the fun and make a fuss. What was the use of these people? Now, he couldn't help but wonder if it was worth it to risk his life for these ignorant people. Li Bu Er, did you see that? This is already the will of the people. Quickly make your decision. The woman in white said. Qin Feiyang looked down at the five-clawed golden dragon and said with a smile, Xiaojin, do you agree? The five-clawed golden dragon said indifferently, If you agree, I have no objections. You rascal. Qin Feiyang shook his head speechlessly. He looked up at the woman in white and said, As your companion, I can't hand him over to you. Don't worry about it. If it comes to us dragons, not only will we not harm it, we will even do our best to nurture it. The woman in white said, This emperor doesn't like hearing this. Your cultivation is only slightly higher than mine. What can you cultivate? The five-clawed golden dragon roared. The white-clothed woman was bewildered. It seems that you still haven't seen through this emperor's strength. The five-clawed golden dragon smiled proudly as a monstrous aura erupted from him. The surrounding crowd was immediately sent flying, each and every one of them in a sorry state. The treasure pavilion was also shaking violently. Rumble. In the end, with a rumbling sound, the treasure pavilion collapsed. Dust and smoke billowed, and countless treasures were buried underneath. The people in the treasure pavilion also ran out with ashen faces. They looked at the five-clawed golden dragon in horror. Brotherly, what are you doing? The manager of the treasure pavilion shouted. In the blink of an eye, the treasure pavilion was razed to the ground. How was he going to explain this to the chief pavilion master? Qin Feiyang glanced at him and said telepathically, You're doing this on purpose, aren't you? Heh. The five-clawed golden dragon smiled secretly. He was doing this on purpose. He had long disliked the steward of the treasure pavilion. How dare he play tricks in front of them without thinking about his own strength? Destroying the treasure pavilion was considered a light punishment. He'd better not offend them again, or his head would be smashed. But at this moment, the manager of the treasure pavilion was the only one who cared about the collapse of the treasure pavilion. The others turned a blind eye to it. Even the staff of the treasure pavilion, such as Run Xiaolan, looked at the five-clawed golden dragon with fear on their faces. This aura was so strong. The white-clothed woman, the chief of the golden dragons, and the 10th elder all stared at the five-clawed golden dragon in shock. The five-clawed golden dragon floated beside Qin Feiyang and looked at the three of them proudly. Now, do you still think that I need your nurturing? What's his cultivation level? Why is even the ancestral dragon so surprised? People muttered. The white-clothed woman took a deep breath and looked at Qin Feiyang. I didn't expect that there would be a beginner immortal realm expert lurking around you. What? Beginner immortal realm? I thought he was only a half-step immortal realm expert, but I didn't expect him to be a beginner immortal realm expert. People were shocked to the extreme. A beginner immortal realm five-clawed golden dragon, and a half-step immortal realm expert. Who is this Li Bu'er? You were joking just now. Even if the young master wants me to go to Divine Dragon Island with you, I won't agree. Although the dragons are strong, you can't compare to the young master in some aspects. The five-clawed golden dragon sneered. Like the time array, there were definitely dragons, but could they compare to the castle and the Black Tortoise realm? Moreover, there were still seals in the castle. When these seals were unlocked, it would be even more terrifying. The most important thing was their character. The dragons were far inferior to Qin Feiyang in terms of character and handling of affairs. For example, the golden dragon ancestral dragon's body. If it were the dragons, they would never allow him to fuse. After all these years together, he already understood what kind of person Qin Feiyang was. Such a loyal and righteous person was hard to find in this world. How could he be willing to leave? Can't compare to him? The white-clothed woman raised her eyebrows. I'm too lazy to talk nonsense with you. If you really want to fight, we're not afraid. The five-clawed golden dragon smiled disdainfully. Although there was no blood and Qin Feiyang couldn't open the slaughter domain, there were more than a dozen heaven-defying artifacts in the castle. Just these heaven-defying artifacts were enough to kill the white-clothed woman, and the other two. Presumptuous. You're simply not putting the dragons in your eyes. Lord Ancestral Dragon, Lord Patriarch, and Lord 10th Elder. Can you bear such arrogant words? Two angry shouts sounded. It was the two well-dressed young men fanning the flames again. Damn you. Young master, I'll go and kill them. The five-clawed golden dragon was furious. No hurry. Deal with the dragons first. Qin Feiyang waved his hand. Anyway, these two people had already entered his must-kill list. Sooner or later he would kill them. There was no hurry. However, before he killed them, he had to figure out one thing. He had a feeling that these two people were targeting him again and again. It didn't seem to be that simple. Sure enough, the two's instigation worked. The 10th elder hated Qin Feiyang to begin with. Hearing the two's words, his killing intent was naturally aroused. He transmitted his voice. Lord Ancestral Dragon, since the young man isn't here, we can't miss this opportunity. Lord Ancestral Dragon, I also think that we can't keep him alive. The golden dragon secretly said. The white-clothed woman's eyes flickered. Suddenly, a trace of killing intent appeared in her eyes as a powerful aura spread out. Are we still going to make a move? Qin Feiyang whispered. Since that was the case, then let's get rid of these three people. However, how should he hide his identity? He couldn't just directly expose his true identity. How about this? Let Hui or Frenzy transform into your appearance, and kill them with a heaven-defying artifact. The five-clawed golden dragon secretly said. Good idea. Qin Feiyang secretly smiled. Not only could he get rid of these three people, but he could also continue to hide his identity. It was the best of both worlds. Although the three of them had left their divine consciousness on Divine Dragon Island, and couldn't really kill them, their physical bodies were priceless treasures. Especially the white-clothed woman. As the ancestral dragon, her physical body was equivalent to a divine treasure. Have mercy. However, just as Qin Feiyang was about to take action, an old voice rolled over. Swish. Following closely, a white figure rushed in front of the white-clothed woman like lightning. Yi Zhong. The white-clothed woman, and the other two were stunned. When did this old man come back? Qin Feiyang and the five-clawed golden dragon also had a suspicious look. The white-clothed woman came back to her senses and asked, Yi Zhong, your family's matter. It's all been taken care of. Yi Zhong nodded and looked down at Qin Feiyang and the five-clawed golden dragon. He looked at the white-clothed woman and said, Come with this old man. After saying that, he rushed towards Yun Xiao. The white-clothed woman frowned and chased after him. What's going on? Everyone looked at the back of the two in confusion. Yun Xiao. Yi Zhong finally stopped. The white-clothed woman also stopped beside Yi Zhong and said, My condolences. My condolences? Yi Zhong was slightly taken aback, shook his head and smiled. I think you've misunderstood. My father is not dead. Not dead. The white-clothed woman was startled for a moment and asked doubtfully, Didn't you say that his time is up? Yes. But my granddaughter found a life-saving divine pill by chance. Father extended his life by 100,000 years. Yi Zhong laughed. It can't be. What divine pill? The white-clothed woman was surprised. I'm not sure either. But this divine pill is indeed useful. This time, I'm actually here to protect Li Buer. Yi Zhong said. Protect him? The white-clothed woman was still surprised and asked suspiciously. Why do you want to protect him? Yi Zhong said. I believe you should also know that he pretended to be dragons to help someone. The white-clothed woman nodded and said. I heard. It seems to be a little girl. Yi Zhong said. This little girl is my granddaughter. What? Your granddaughter? The white-clothed woman was stunned. Was there such a coincidence? Yi Zhong smiled and said. To tell you the truth, the divine pill that helped my father extend his life was given by him. It's actually him? The white-clothed woman lowered her head and looked at Qin Feiyang standing on the street, her eyes full of disbelief. Li Buer pretended to be dragons to help my granddaughter, and he saved my father. So now he is my benefactor. I can't let anything happen to him. Yi Zhong said. The white-clothed woman shook her head and smiled bitterly. She never thought that this matter would be related to Yi Zhong. Also, do you really think that killing him is the best choice? Yi Zhong said again. What do you mean? The white-clothed woman was suspicious. Although I have been accompanying my father for more than a year, there are people who report to me what happened in the Dragon God Palace. For example, he killed Wang Darren and the other two. Also, he and Frenzy killed Gu Fan and the others. The strength they've displayed has already far surpassed their cultivations. Shouldn't we cherish such a talent? Why do we want to get rid of them? Yi Zhong said. Chapter 2531. The woman in white remained silent. No matter what, nothing can happen to Li Buer. Otherwise Shui and the old man will be angry. I can't go against my conscience. Yi Zhong looked at the woman in white with a firm attitude. The woman in white shook her head and smiled. To be honest, I admire him too. Yi Zhong was surprised. After killing Gu Fan and the others, I asked them personally. Do you know? Both of them have a heaven-defying technique. The woman in white said. I know. Lin Hua told me about it. Yi Zhong nodded. The woman in white said. Lin Hua should know about you too. What did they say? Yes. Although they offended the dragons again and again, they were actually on the dragon's side. Yi Zhong said. The woman in white said. After leaving, I was thinking about whether I should let them join the dragons. That's great. They have your heavenly god technique. In time, they might be able to fight against Qin Feiyang. Yi Zhong said. That's what I thought too. But I have my concerns. This concern is their identity. They have a heaven-defying technique, and the protection of an immortal. Now they even have a 5-clawed golden dragon. Would you believe me if I told you that his identity is simple? And that young man? His strength is almost on par with ours. Although he seems unreliable, his heart is as clear as a mirror. Have you ever wondered what kind of people they are? What if they're a match for us dragons? The woman in white said worriedly. Our dragons only have the Dragon Slayer Palace? You suspect that they're from the Dragon Slayer Palace? Yi Zhong frowned. The woman in white said. We can't rule out that possibility, right? Yes. But why did the people of the Dragon Slaying Palace come to our Dragon God Palace? And they'll be controlled by the fate contract after entering the Dragon God Palace. Yi Zhong said. The white-clothed woman continued. Don't forget, Qin Feiyang will be able to undo the fate contract. In the end, all of this is just your personal guess. Yi Zhong shook his head. That's right. It's also possible that they have nothing to do with the Dragon-Slaying Palace. But if we want them to join the dragons, we must first figure out their origins. After the battle in the Inland Sea, we dragons have suffered heavy losses. We can't afford any more accidents. The white-clothed woman sighed. Yi Zhong was silent for a while and said, How about this? Don't worry about it. Leave this matter to me. You'll deal with it? The white-robed woman was stunned. Yi Zhong smiled and said, You can't be doubting this old man's ability, right? I wouldn't dare. The white-clothed woman smiled and nodded. All right then, I'll leave it to you. In any case, when you return, I'll have to leave the Dragon God Palace and return to Divine Dragon Island. Let's go then, Yi Zhong said. The two immediately flashed and landed in the sky above the treasure pavilion. How will they deal with Li Buer? Do you even need to think about it? He won't be able to escape death. Seeing the two of them come down, everyone began to whisper to each other. Li Buer. Yi Zhong glanced at the crowd and looked at Qin Feiyang. Speak. Qin Feiyang said lightly. He had never had a good impression of Yi Zhong. What an arrogant boy. Yi Zhong snorted and asked. Are you willing to join the dragons? What the hell? Join the dragons? Qin Feiyang was stunned. What the hell? The others were also stunned. Shouldn't he be punished for making such a mistake? Why did he let him join the dragons? What the hell was going on? The chief of the Golden Dragons and the 10th Elder also looked at Yi Zhong in disbelief. It was different from what they had expected. What was this old man Yi trying to do? Yi Zhong asked. Are you willing to join? No. Qin Feiyang shook his head. Yi Zhong was not surprised by this answer. But the others were extremely speechless. What kind of person was Yi Zhong? He was Long Zun's most trusted human. He was also the only person in the world who could freely enter and leave the Divine Dragon Island. Moreover, even a mystical dragon like the Golden Dragon tribe leader had to be courteous in front of Yi Zhong. It could be said that Yi Zhong's position in the dragons was very important. However, in the face of Yi Zhong's invitation, this person actually refused? This guy's brain must have been kicked by a donkey. How lucky was this? But then again, Li Buer had made such a big mistake. Not only was he not punished, but he was even allowed to join the dragons? No matter how one looked at it, it seemed like he was being rewarded. Strange. What was Yi Zhong trying to do? If you don't want to join, I won't force you. Let's take a step back. I will accept you as my disciple. Are you willing? Yi Zhong smiled. What? Everyone looked at each other. What was Yi Zhong trying to do? Qin Feiyang raised his head and looked at Yi Zhong. His eyes were full of suspicion. One had to know. There were many grudges between him and Yi Zhong. Logically speaking, now that there was such a good opportunity, this old man should take the opportunity to get rid of him. But why did he still want to accept him as his disciple? Why did he seem to be a different person after disappearing for a while? Was he helping him? Or could it be that Yi Zhong was plotting something else? Yi Zhong's behavior was too abnormal. If it was anyone else, they would be suspicious, let alone Qin Feiyang, who was always vigilant. Kid, I am helping you. If you don't join the dragons and become my disciple, I can't help you. Moreover, it's not a loss for you to take me as your master, because I have never taken in a disciple in my life. You are the first. Moreover, as long as you become my disciple, you will be able to save a lot of unnecessary trouble in the Dragon God Palace. Yi Zhong transmitted his voice. When Qin Feiyang heard this, he couldn't help but frown. Was he really helping him? But why was that? He didn't believe that Yi Zhong was a good person. This was really puzzling. However, Yi Zhong's last sentence was right. Becoming Yi Zhong's disciple would definitely save him a lot of trouble. After all, Yi Zhong was the chief hall master of the Dragon God Palace. In the future, he would be second only to one person in the Dragon God Palace. The most important thing was, this was also a good opportunity to get close to Yi Zhong, because in order to complete the task given to him by the ancestors, he first had to get closer to Yi Zhong. After thinking about it, Qin Feiyang cupped his hands and said, Disciple Libur greets master. He agreed. Everyone looked at Qin Feiyang in surprise. They all thought that Qin Feiyang would still refuse like before. But they didn't expect that he would actually agree. Then, wouldn't his current status rise along with the tide? The disciple of the chief hall master of the Dragon God Palace was basically standing at the top of the pyramid of the divine land. Very good. Yi Zhong nodded and smiled. How could this be? Not only was he not punished, but he also became Yi Zhong's disciple. In the crowd, the two well-dressed young men's faces were extremely gloomy. This was too dramatic. And the manager of the treasure pavilion, at this moment, he also had a face of disbelief. He thought that this person would definitely die, but he didn't expect that he would rise to the sky in one step. Now, even his treasure pavilion couldn't afford to climb up. In his heart, he couldn't help but regret. No. There's still a chance to save him. Anyway, he doesn't know what I planned to do before. As long as I find him the alchemy fire, I'll definitely be able to build a good relationship with him. The manager of the treasure pavilion muttered. At the same time, Qin Feiyang also looked at the manager of the treasure pavilion and the two well-dressed young men, and a sneer flashed in his eyes. Immediately, Qin Feiyang looked up at Yi Zhong and said with a smile, Master, this disciple wants a greeting gift. The corner of Yi Zhong's mouth twitched. This was really impolite. But with so many people watching, he couldn't refuse, so he asked, What do you want? Qin Feiyang pointed at the two well-dressed young men and said, I want their heads. What? The two well-dressed young men's faces suddenly turned pale. And Yi Zhong, the woman in white, the 10th elder, the chief of the golden dragons, and the others all looked at the two of them. He actually wanted the heads of the two of them. Did they have some sort of grudge? Qin Feiyang said, Master, this disciple only has such a small request. You won't refuse, right? Yi Zhong smiled bitterly. This kid really knew how to climb up a pole. Okay. Yi Zhong nodded and looked at the 10th elder saying, 10th elder, kill them. The 10th elder was very unhappy at this moment, but he really didn't dare to disobey Yi Zhong's words. Qin Feiyang, I didn't expect you to be so ruthless. We were just joking with you. And you actually want to kill with a borrowed knife. Seeing the 10th elder make a move, the two well-dressed young men's expressions immediately changed, and they transmitted their voices to Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang's heart trembled. They actually knew his true identity? If you really want to do this, then don't blame us for being ruthless and exposing your identity in public. Think about it yourself. The two of them continued to transmit their voices. Qin Feiyang's pupils contracted, and he looked at the 10th elder and said, "Stop." The 10th elder was stunned and looked at Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly and said, "I was just joking to liven up the atmosphere." Joking? The 10th elder was immediately annoyed and said angrily, "How can you make such a joke?" Yi Zhong's face was filled with helplessness. What kind of young man was this? Cough cough. 10th elder, please mind your identity. I'm now the disciple of the chief hall master, and I'm his only disciple. Save me some face in front of so many people. Qin Feiyang coughed and said, "You." The 10th elder was furious. Was he going to use Yi Zhong's power to act like a tyrant? He didn't expect that he had the potential to be a good-for-nothing. The white-clothed woman and the golden dragon's chief also turned to look at Yi Zhong with an extremely strange expression. It was as if they were asking if it was wise to accept him as a disciple. Yi Zhong laughed dryly and waved his hand. Okay, this matter is over. Li Buer, if there's nothing else, go back to the Dragon God Palace. Don't mess around outside. Yes, master. Qin Feiyang nodded and smiled. Let's go. Yi Zhong looked at the white-clothed woman and said with a smile. The white-clothed woman shook her head and turned to return to the Dragon God Palace. The 10th elder glanced at Qin Feiyang, snorted from his nose, and turned to leave angrily. The golden dragon's chief looked at the 5-clawed golden dragon floating beside Qin Feiyang, and also left with a trace of unwillingness. To be honest, he really wanted to take the 5-clawed golden dragon away. But now this boy had become Yi Zhong's disciple. Yi Zhong's position in the dragons was higher than his, so it was really difficult for him to make a move. His heart was full of regret. But fortunately, this boy had become Yi Zhong's disciple, so he would be considered a member of the dragons in the future. The 5-clawed golden dragon that followed this boy naturally belonged to the dragons. At least it didn't benefit outsiders. Chapter 2532. The 5-clawed golden dragon said, "Qin Feiyang, is Yi Zhong out of his mind today?" "I think so." Qin Feiyang nodded. Everything that had happened today was completely out of his expectations. "I think you have to be careful. This old man must be plotting something." The 5-clawed golden dragon reminded him secretly. "I know." Qin Feiyang responded and looked at the two young men in luxurious clothes, but he was stunned. There was actually no trace of the two of them. When did they run away? But the others didn't leave. They all looked at Qin Feiyang in awe. "Brotherly congratulations." The manager of the treasure pavilion ran to Qin Feiyang with a flattering smile. Qin Feiyang ignored him and glanced at the crowd. The two young men in luxurious clothes were indeed gone. Earlier at the auction house, when he heard the conversation between the two of them, he already had this thought. But he rejected it, because only the people of the dragon-slaying palace knew his identity. Even very few people in the dragon-slaying palace knew about it. However, he didn't expect that the two of them would know his identity just as he thought. Why didn't they expose him? There was only one explanation. They were also from the dragon-slaying palace. Moreover, the two of them were on the opposing side of the dragon-slaying palace. Otherwise, it was impossible for them to provoke him again and again. But what role did they play in the dragon-slaying palace? Brotherly? Seeing that Qin Feiyang ignored him, the manager of the treasure pavilion looked a little embarrassed and spoke again. Qin Feiyang was slightly stunned. He came back to his senses, looked at the manager of the treasure pavilion and asked, "What's the matter?" The manager of the treasure pavilion said with a smile, "I've asked the chief pavilion master about the deal you proposed not long ago." "Really?" Qin Feiyang looked at him playfully. The manager of the treasure pavilion was shocked. Why did he feel like he had been seen through? He nodded and said, "Yes, I did." Qin Feiyang smiled and asked, "What did the chief pavilion lord say?" Chief pavilion master said that it's just a few clusters of alchemy fire. It's a small matter. The treasure pavilion manager smiled flatteringly. Hypocrite. Ren Xiaolan stood in the crowd, and heard the words of the Treasure Pavilion's manager. A trace of disdain crept into her eyes. Small matter? Qin Feiyang chuckled and said, I thought your Treasure Pavilion wasn't willing to do business with me. Of course not. It is the Treasure Pavilion's honor to do business with you, brotherly. The supervisor of the Treasure Pavilion said with a smile. Hee hee. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. He looked at Ren Xiaolan and beckoned, Come here. Me. Ren Xiaolan was a little stunned. Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded. Ren Xiaolan walked up to Qin Feiyang suspiciously. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, Take out your image crystal. Ren Xiaolan was even more puzzled, and took out her image crystal. Qin Feiyang also took out his image crystal, and established a contract with Ren Xiaolan. He said, If I need anything in the future, I will send you a message, and you can help me deal with it. Okay. Ren Xiaolan nodded, and was secretly delighted. This person was now the disciple of the chief hall master. It was an honor to establish a contract with him. Moreover, in the future with this relationship, she would definitely be valued by the Treasure Pavilion, and have a meteoric rise from then on. On the other hand, the Treasure Pavilion manager's expression was a little ugly. As the manager of the Treasure Pavilion, this person did not establish a contract with him, but chose to establish a contract with an ordinary staff member. Wasn't this deliberately making things difficult for him? Qin Feiyang looked at the Treasure Pavilion manager and said with a smile, Remember what I'm about to say. In the future, I will only do business with Ren Xiaolan. The Treasure Pavilion manager's expression froze. Ren Xiaolan was pleasantly surprised. This was already an undisguised care for her. Goodbye. Qin Feiyang waved at Ren Xiaolan and turned to leave. Farewell, young master. Ren Xiaolan bowed. Ren Xiaolan, I really didn't expect you to be so good at pleasing people. The Treasure Pavilion manager sneered. Ren Xiaolan's expression froze. She looked at the Treasure Pavilion manager suspiciously and asked, Sir Manager, why do you say that? You know very well in your heart. I asked you to keep an eye on him, but you went to curry favor with him. Maybe you even did something shameful with him in the VIP room. The Treasure Pavilion manager thought to himself, Sir Manager, tell me clearly. What shameful thing? I can understand that you are dissatisfied with me, but you can't insult my character. Besides, I'm also working for the Treasure Pavilion. Ren Xiaolan said angrily. Humph. The Treasure Pavilion manager snorted, and looked at the crowd around him. What are you looking at? What's there to look at? Get lost. When the crowd heard this, they immediately dispersed. Qin Feiyang was not afraid of the Treasure Pavilion manager, but they were. Because in the eyes of ordinary people, the Treasure Pavilion manager was like a god. The Treasure Pavilion manager looked at the staff of the Treasure Pavilion and shouted, What are you waiting for? Hurry up and rebuild the Treasure Pavilion. The group of staff immediately got busy. Ren Xiaolan sighed secretly, and also joined in the rebuilding of the Treasure Pavilion. The Treasure Pavilion manager looked at Ren Xiaolan, with a sneer in the depths of his eyes. Outside the city, on a certain mountain peak, Qin Feiyang stood alone at the edge of the cliff, looking at the mountains below with flickering eyes. As for the five-clawed golden dragon, it was still clinging to Qin Feiyang's wrist. Little Jean, if those two are really from the Dragon Slayer Palace, what do you think I should do? Qin Feiyang suddenly said, So what if they are from the Dragon Slayer Palace? Since they dared to provoke us, they should be prepared to die. The five-clawed golden dragon was full of hostility. Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled, taking out the image crystal. Buzz. After a while, Jiang Dafei's virtual image appeared and said respectfully, Greetings, young lord. Qin Feiyang nodded. I was just about to go to the Treasure Pavilion to look for you. But I heard what happened there, and thought that you had already left. Congratulations. Jiang Dafei said with a smile. What's there to congratulate? Qin Feiyang shook his head. Becoming Yi Zhong's disciple is one step closer to the plan. Shouldn't I congratulate you? Jiang Dafei was suspicious. Qin Feiyang shook his head and asked, Are you done with your business? Jiang Dafei nodded. Then come and find me. Qin Feiyang told Jiang Dafei the coordinates of his current location. Okay. By the way, Lei Bing and Wang Qi heard that I was going to the Black Tortoise world to cultivate, and they want to go with me. Do you agree? Jiang Dafei asked carefully. Wang Qi. Qin Feiyang was suspicious. He had spent some time with Lei Bing, so he knew that he was a spy in Serpent City. However, Wang Qi was a stranger to him. Jiang Dafei said. Wang Qi is from Snow Dragon City, and he is now the city lord. His cultivation is the same as mine and Lei Bing's, the complete ninth heaven realm. I see. Then let them come with me. Qin Feiyang said. Thank you, young lord. I'll inform them right away. Jiang Dafei thanked him and turned off the image crystal. A moment later, 3 figures appeared behind Qin Feiyang. One of them was Jiang Dafei. One of the other 2 was a burly man in black. The other was a white-haired old man. He was stooped but his eyes were sharp. The black-haired man was Lei Bing. The white-haired old man was undoubtedly Wang Qi. Greetings, young lord. The 3 of them bowed. Qin Feiyang looked at the 3 of them, and then at Lei Bing and Wang Qi. He smiled and said, If you want to cultivate in the Black Tortoise realm, you can tell me directly. You don't have to be so careful. The 2 of them looked at each other with joy in their hearts. They bowed and said, Thank you, young lord. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, You came at the right time. I want to ask you about 2 people. Who? The 3 of them were suspicious. Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and the 2 young men in luxurious clothes appeared. The 3 of them looked at the 2 young men in luxurious clothes with a trace of suspicion in their eyes. You haven't seen them before? Qin Feiyang asked. The 3 of them shook their heads. Qin Feiyang said, I suspect that they are from the Dragon Slayer Palace. The Dragon Slayer Palace? The 3 of them were stunned. These 2 people provoke me time and time again in the Treasure Pavilion. They even know who I am, so I have to get to the bottom of this. Qin Feiyang said, They know your identity? Then this matter really can't be taken lightly. But young lord, if they are really from the Dragon Slayer Palace, it's useless to ask us. Because you know that there are many people in the Dragon Slayer Palace that we don't know. We have to ask the Divine General about this. The 3 of them said in a low voice. Qin Feiyang pondered for a while and said, Send him a message. I'll ask him. Okay. Jiang Dafei nodded and took out the image crystal. Buzz. Soon. A masked man in black armor appeared. When the Divine General saw Qin Feiyang beside him, he immediately glared at the 3 of them and said with a smile, Young lord, congratulations. Why are you glaring at them? Are you unhappy to see me? Qin Feiyang said indifferently. It's nothing, it's nothing. The Divine General waved his hand. Let me ask you, who are they? Qin Feiyang pointed to the 2 young men next to him and asked. The Divine General looked at the 2 of them, and his pupils suddenly shrank. Young lord, why are you asking about them? Judging from your reaction, they are really from the Dragon Slayer Palace. Qin Feiyang said. Yes, but I don't understand. How do you know them? The Divine General was doubtful. Qin Feiyang said. They came to provoke me. How can I not know them? Provoke you? When did this happen? The Divine General was surprised. Qin Feiyang said. It's at the previous Treasure Pavilion. There must be a misunderstanding. The Divine General hurriedly said. Although Qin Feiyang's tone was calm, one could see a trace of killing intent in his eyes. Misunderstanding? Do you think I'm a 3-year-old child? Qin Feiyang sneered and said. Tell me, who are they? This. The Divine General hesitated. Speak, Qin Feiyang shouted. Even though they were separated by a great distance, and were using an image crystal to communicate, the Divine General still felt an enormous pressure from Qin Feiyang's body. The Divine General sighed deeply and said, To be honest, they are your competitors. Someone competing with me? Qin Feiyang frowned. Jiang Dafei and the other 2 were also very surprised. After thinking carefully, they said in surprise, Sir Divine General, could it be the other? The Divine General nodded and said, Yes, they are 2 of the other 3 young lords. Jiang Dafei smiled bitterly and shook his head. He looked at Qin Feiyang and said, Young Hall Master, it is indeed as you expected. They are already envious of the plundering of the Northern City Lord's manors, and obtaining the dragon race's 10 heaven-defying divine artifacts. Qin Feiyang's eyes were extremely terrifying at this moment. They were like blades. Young lord, since they crossed the line and came to provoke us, we won't be polite. Lei Bing snorted. Crossed the line? Qin Feiyang was slightly stunned and looked at Lei Bing suspiciously. What did he mean? Chapter 2533. Let me answer your question. The immortal general said. Qin Feiyang looked up at the immortal general. When this task was first issued, the 4 great emperors set the rules. The 4 young lords are each in charge of a place. No matter what happens, you can't cross the line and interfere with the affairs of the other 3 places. And now these 2 young lords have broken this rule. The immortal general sighed. I see. Qin Feiyang nodded and said jokingly. So even if I kill them now, the higher-ups of the dragon-slaying palace can't say anything? Young lord, they might just be impulsive. You can't really kill them. The immortal general said hurriedly. Qin Feiyang said. According to what you said, I should just stand here and take the beating? That's not what I meant. They're only doing this once. We're all members of the dragon-slaying palace. Why do they have to make it seem like they're mortal enemies? The immortal general said. That's easy for you to say. When they hid in the crowd and fanned the flames and tried to kill me, why didn't they show mercy? Qin Feiyang smiled coldly. Yes. They're in the wrong, but can't you be magnanimous and forgive them this time? The immortal general was helpless. They have to pay the price for doing wrong. That's my principle. Qin Feiyang said lightly. I know. Then bear with it for a while. I'll report to Emperor Qin and see what he thinks. The immortal general said. Suit yourself. Qin Feiyang shrugged and said. Tell me first, which place are they in charge of? This. I'd better report to Emperor Qin first. After the immortal general said that, he turned off the image crystal. What a joke. How could he tell Qin Feiyang about this? Qin Feiyang was a vengeful person. Once he knew, he would immediately send people to kill these 2 people. This guy only knows how to play dumb. Qin Feiyang was speechless. He looked at Jiang Dafei and the other 2 and asked, Do you know? We definitely don't know. The 3 of them smiled bitterly. Qin Feiyang pondered for a moment. Looking at the 3 people, he said, Wait, only 2 have appeared this time. Where's the other one? Maybe he doesn't want to be your enemy. It's also possible that he works for Sunlight Emperor. Emperor Yang and Emperor Qin are as close as brothers. I don't think they would help the other 2 to deal with you. Jiang Dafei and the other 2 guessed. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, So I still have allies. Allies? The 3 of them exchanged glances. Jiang Dafei said, It's too early to say that. There are no eternal enemies or friends in this world. There are only eternal interests. So even if you are facing Sunlight Emperor's people, you can't take them lightly. Lei Bing and Wang Qi also nodded. Qin Feiyang looked at the 3 of them and nodded in appreciation. Good awareness. The 3 of them rubbed their heads and felt a little embarrassed. Well, you don't have to worry about this. I will deal with it. Go and cultivate in seclusion. Qin Feiyang waved his hand and sent the 3 of them to the Black Tortoise realm. Then, Qin Feiyang lowered his head and pondered. Time passed by breath. Suddenly, Qin Feiyang looked down at the 5-clawed golden dragon and said, Little Gold, go to the west, south, and east to investigate them. Be careful to hide your identity. I promised to complete the task. The 5-clawed golden dragon rose into the air and looked at Qin Feiyang. Then he flew away without looking back. Watching the 5-clawed golden dragon leave, Qin Feiyang sneered. So what if they were from the Dragon Slayer Palace? As long as they dared to provoke him, he would not let them go. Then, Qin Feiyang called Madman out and returned to the Dragon God Palace. Brotherly, congratulations. I hope Brotherly will take care of me in the future. When Qin Feiyang and Madman appeared in the valley, a large group of people immediately surrounded them with flattery on their faces. Obviously, they had all received the news and were envious in their hearts. He was actually valued by the Grand Palace Master and accepted as a disciple. This person was too lucky, but in this regard, Qin Feiyang only smiled faintly. Madman completely ignored those people and directly entered the cave. Libur! Suddenly, a shout rang out. The people surrounding the valley immediately looked up and saw a law enforcer descending from the sky. Lin Hua. What's the matter? Qin Feiyang stood at the entrance of the cave and looked at Lin Hua and asked. Lin Hua also changed his previous attitude, and his face was full of respect. Under the orders of the Grand Palace Master, you and Madman are invited to the 10th island. Lin Hua landed in front of the cave and said with a flattering smile. What? He actually went directly to the 10th island. Oh my god, this is really a step to the sky. It is said that the monsters of the Dragon God Palace are basically all on the 10th island. The people gathered above were full of envy. However, Qin Feiyang said with a calm face, not interested. Don't disturb us. Madman also said to Lin Hua. Then, the two entered the cave without looking back and set up a divine force boundary. Lin Hua was dumbfounded. The group of people above was also extremely shocked. The 10th island was a place that the disciples of the Dragon God Palace dreamed of going to, because entering the 10th island was a symbol of status and identity, but they didn't expect these two to directly refuse. They were truly two different species. They are indeed different from the rest. Lin Hua came back to his senses and shook his head with a wry smile. He opened the altar and went back to report. The others also left one after another. Qin Feiyang and Madman also entered the ancient castle. Madman was cultivating in seclusion. Qin Feiyang was focused on studying the concealment art and rising dragon art. A day outside was 100 years in the ancient castle. After painstakingly studying, Qin Feiyang finally found the direction to improve these two divine techniques. The next morning, a white-clothed woman came to the Dragon God Palace. The woman was about 20 years old. Her hair was like a waterfall, her white dress fluttered, and her skin shone with a hazy light like a fairy. The woman entered the Dragon God Palace and went directly to the first island. Who is she? So beautiful. But how come I don't remember such a beautiful woman on the first island? The woman's clothes fluttered like a snow-white butterfly. Any man who saw her would have a trace of amazement in their eyes. Where is she going? Wait. She seems to be going to the valley where Li Bu is. No way. Is she going to find Li Bu? This bastard, what kind of dog shit luck does he have? Everyone was indignant. First, he was accepted as a disciple by the Grand Hall Master, and now a peerless woman came to find him. Why did all these good things happen to him? The white-clothed woman stopped in the sky above the valley and glanced at it. Her gaze finally fell on the cave, and a smile appeared on her crystal-clear face. Li Bu. She spoke softly, and her voice was as pleasant as the sound of nature. But at this moment, Qin Feiyang was focused on seclusion, and he was afraid of being disturbed, so he deliberately sealed off his 5 senses. At this moment, he had just reached a critical moment. Therefore, he didn't hear the voice of the white-clothed woman at all. The white-clothed woman waited for a while and was slightly stunned. Was he not in the cave? Li Bu. Why are you pretending? We all know you are in the cave. Someone is looking for you, come out quickly. A few idlers who couldn't stand it any longer stared at the cave and shouted. However, the white-clothed woman didn't appreciate it, and those who opposed were a little disgusted, but they didn't say anything. Miss, this Li Bu is too rude. Why don't you come to our cave first? But those people didn't realize it at all, and their faces were full of flattery. The white-clothed woman turned a deaf ear and looked at the cave quietly. Time passed quietly. Bang! In the cultivation room, Qin Feiyang's aura suddenly soared. He reached the great accomplishment paragon in an instant. But it wasn't over yet. His aura was still soaring. Bang! The next moment, it soared to the perfected paragon. Haha! Success, I finally succeeded. Qin Feiyang also suddenly opened his eyes and couldn't help laughing. What's the matter? Fire Lotus heard the noise and ran in, looking at Qin Feiyang in confusion. Girl, great news! Qin Feiyang stepped forward and grabbed Fire Lotus's shoulder, wild with joy. What great news! Fire Lotus was suspicious. Qin Feiyang said, the Rising Dragon technique and the Concealment technique have already raised my level. Fire Lotus was stunned, looking at Qin Feiyang, and said, is your current cultivation level related to the Rising Dragon technique? That's right. The Rising Dragon technique can now increase my cultivation level by 2 small realms. And the concealment technique has also increased from once a day to twice a day. Qin Feiyang laughed. Although it didn't seem to be much of an increase, one had to know that at Qin Feiyang's cultivation level, an additional small realm of cultivation was equivalent to an additional layer of protection. There was also the concealment technique. In the past, it could only be activated once a day, but now it could be activated twice. This was a qualitative leap. I see. Fire Lotus nodded in realization and said with a smile, "No wonder you're so happy. However, you're hurting me." Huh? Only then did Qin Feiyang notice that he had lost his composure. He hurriedly let go of Fire Lotus and smiled awkwardly. "Sorry." Fire Lotus rubbed her shoulders and said with a smile, "Also, I just heard a familiar voice outside." "What familiar voice?" Qin Feiyang was suspicious. Fire Lotus said, "It seems to be the woman you helped in the treasure pavilion." "It can't be. Why is she in the Dragon God Palace?" Qin Feiyang was stunned. "How would I know?" Fire Lotus was speechless. "All right, I'll go out and take a look." Qin Feiyang deactivated the Rising Dragon technique, and his cultivation returned to the level of a divine lord. He appeared in the cave abode and walked to the entrance. "It's really him?" When he saw the woman in white, Qin Feiyang's expression immediately fell into shock. The woman in white was like an orchid in an empty valley. She stood quietly in the sky above the valley, exuding a tranquil aura. "Don't you recognize me?" The woman in white also saw Qin Feiyang. She landed in Qin Feiyang's valley and stood opposite Qin Feiyang with a smile. You're a little different from when you were in the treasure pavilion, so I didn't dare to recognize you," Qin Feiyang said. The difference was indeed quite big. When they were in the treasure pavilion, the woman's clothes were a little tattered, and there was dirt on her body. Most importantly, she looked extremely haggard. But now she was radiant and peerless. Difference? The woman in white was stunned. She looked at herself and shook her head with a smile. "I've embarrassed myself." "No." Qin Feiyang waved his hand. Chapter 2534. The woman in white smiled sweetly and asked, "Aren't you going to invite me in?" "This?" Qin Feiyang shook his head. "My cave abode will probably be despised by you." "Is that so? Then I'm really curious," the woman in white said. Qin Feiyang smiled helplessly. With a wave of his hand, the barrier dissipated and he retreated to the side, saying, "Please come in." The woman in white walked slowly into the cave abode. She's in. This bastard, he really makes people jealous." The few people standing not far away looked at this scene with displeasure in their eyes. Inside the cave abode, looking at the simple cave abode, the woman in white was stunned. This was the most casual cave abode she had ever seen. There was nothing. How could this be called a cave abode? It was simply a cave. "I didn't lie to you, did I?" Qin Feiyang laughed dryly. "You're really a casual person." The woman in white shook her head. "I think it's quite good." Qin Feiyang smiled and asked suspiciously, "Why are you in the Dragon God Palace? Are you also a disciple of the Dragon God Palace?" "I'm not." The woman in white shook her head. "No. Then how did you enter the Dragon God Palace?" Qin Feiyang was stunned. "It's a secret." The woman in white smiled mysteriously and said, "Actually, I came to find you this time to thank you in person." "Thank you?" Qin Feiyang was slightly stunned and shook his head. "It's fine, it's just a small matter. To you, it may be a small matter, but to me, it's more important than my life. I'm also here to invite you to my house as a guest," the woman in white said. Qin Feiyang hurriedly said, "There's no need for that. My great-grandfather really wants to meet you. He told me to invite you over. For the sake of the old man, please go." The woman in white's face was full of pleading. "This?" Qin Feiyang hesitated. The woman in white smiled and said, "Don't worry, we won't eat you. Moreover, this might be an unexpected surprise for you." "Surprise?" Qin Feiyang shook his head with a wry smile. He could only hope that it was not a scare. "How is it? If you don't agree, then I won't leave." The woman in white smiled slyly. "All right." Qin Feiyang nodded helplessly. The woman in white was overjoyed and urged, "Then let's go." "Are we going now?" Qin Feiyang looked at him in astonishment. Yeah. The white-robed woman nodded. But I have something on my hands right now. Qin Feiyang said awkwardly. What is it? The white-robed woman was doubtful. Qin Feiyang didn't answer. How about this? You go back first and give me the coordinates. When I'm done, I'll go there directly. Actually, he was fine. However, he couldn't leave the Dragon God Palace with the white-clothed woman, because he had already cancelled the fate contract. If he left with the white-clothed woman, then this matter would be exposed. Therefore, he had to send the white-clothed woman away first. You're not lying to me, are you? The white-clothed woman looked at Qin Feiyang suspiciously. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, Facing such a beautiful woman like you, lying to you is a sin. The white-clothed woman couldn't help but laugh. This person is quite humorous. How about this? I'll wait for you outside the Dragon God Palace. When you're done, come find me. After the white-clothed woman finished speaking, she didn't give Qin Feiyang a chance to speak and directly turned to leave. Troublesome. Qin Feiyang shook his head. He could only enter the ancient castle and call Madman out. But since this woman wasn't from the Dragon God Palace, how could she enter the Dragon God Palace? When Madman brought Qin Feiyang out of the Dragon God Palace, he found that the white-clothed woman was really waiting at the bottom of the stone stairs. Madman glanced at the stone stairs and saw that there was no one around, so he called Qin Feiyang out. She's down there. I guess this time, you accidentally saved a very powerful person. Madman said. Either this woman is related to the dragons, or she is related to Yi Zhong. Qin Feiyang nodded, because only with this explanation could the white-clothed woman enter the Dragon God Palace. Then be careful. Don't let your luck turn into a calamity. Madman smiled mockingly. You can really talk nonsense? Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes and sent Madman to the ancient castle before walking down the stone stairs. So fast. Seeing this, the white-clothed woman was surprised. It's just a small matter. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. If I knew it would be so fast, I would have waited for you outside the cave. The white-clothed woman said. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, Let's go. The white-clothed woman nodded, opened an altar and jumped on it. Qin Feiyang also jumped on the altar. Soon, the two of them landed in the sky above a mountain range. Qin Feiyang looked down. As far as the eye could see, it was desolate and uninhabited. A trace of suspicion crept into his eyes. But at this moment, the white-clothed woman opened another altar. And Qin Feiyang was stunned. If one altar couldn't be reached, how far was this woman's home from the Dragon God Palace? Next, he was even more puzzled. The woman continued to open altars. After opening more than 30 altars, she descended above a mountain range before stopping. In the mountain, the vegetation was lush. A river meandered across the entire mountain range. The river water was extremely clear. We're here. The white-clothed woman smiled. Qin Feiyang scanned the area below him. Soon, he saw a simple and unadorned little courtyard at a certain point in the river. Let's go. The white-clothed woman brought Qin Feiyang and flew towards the small courtyard. Not long after, the two of them landed in the courtyard. Qin Feiyang looked around the courtyard. He didn't expect the woman to live in such a simple place. The woman glanced around the courtyard. Seeing that there was no one in the courtyard, she looked at the river. And by the river, an old man in sackcloth was quietly sitting on a small bench fishing. On the left and right sides of the old man in sackcloth, there were two white-haired old men. They're there. The white-clothed woman smiled. Qin Feiyang turned around and locked his eyes on the backs of the two white-haired old men. Why were these two backs so familiar? Qin Feiyang followed behind the white-clothed woman and walked along the path in front of the courtyard towards the river. The more he looked, the more familiar he felt the two backs were. Wait! Suddenly, Qin Feiyang's footsteps froze. Two faces appeared in his mind. It's them. It can't be such a coincidence. Great-grandfather, grandfather, second-grandfather. Before he walked over, the white-clothed woman shouted with a smile. The old man in sackcloth immediately turned his head to look at the white-clothed woman, and then his eyes fell on Qin Feiyang. Was it this young man who helped him extend his life by 100,000 years? The The white-clothed woman trotted over and said with a smile, "Great-grandfather, I didn't disappoint you. I invited Li Buer here." "Good, good, good." The old man in sackcloth nodded with a smile. Then he got up and looked at the two white-haired old men and scolded. "Why are you still sitting there? Get up and welcome the little brother." The two white-haired old men looked at each other and couldn't help but smile bitterly. They got up and slowly turned around to look at Qin Feiyang. It's true. Qin Feiyang was extremely shocked. These two people turned out to be Yi Zhong and Yi Cheng. Grandfather? Second grandfather? So the white-clothed woman was Yi Zhong's granddaughter? How is it? Are you surprised? The white-clothed woman looked at Qin Feiyang and asked. Surprised? Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled bitterly. It was indeed a shock. Yi Zhong looked at Qin Feiyang and said, "You just acknowledged me as your master yesterday. How come you can't recognize me today?" "Greetings, master." Qin Feiyang smiled helplessly and cupped his hands in front of his chest. The old man in sackcloth glared at Yi Zhong and scolded. "Don't put on airs. Hurry up and make tea. I want the best tea." "Father, he is my disciple after all. You want me, his master, to make tea for his disciple? That's not right." Yi Zhong said unhappily. "What's wrong? I knew it. He is my savior." "Hurry up." The old man in sackcloth said angrily. Okay. Don't be angry. I'll go right away." Yi Zhong said hurriedly, and then walked to the small courtyard. When he passed by Qin Feiyang, he couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes and chuckled. "Master, it's been hard on you." Yi Zhong's body stiffened. He was obviously laughing at him. "Brat, just you wait." Yi Zhong snorted coldly and walked to the courtyard without looking back. "Little brother, thank you so much. If not for you, I would have been buried in half a year at most. I will always remember this great kindness in my heart. Please accept my bow." The old man in sackcloth walked to Qin Feiyang with the help of Yi Cheng and the white-clothed woman. "Old man, you can't accept this," Qin Feiyang said hurriedly. However, the old man in sackcloth insisted on bowing to Qin Feiyang. "Thank you." Yi Cheng also bowed to Qin Feiyang gratefully. Qin Feiyang looked at Yi Cheng and couldn't help but shake his head and smile bitterly. "I really didn't expect that the person I saved was your father. I also didn't expect you to have such an elixir," Yi Cheng said secretly. He also smiled bitterly in his heart. When he left, Qin Feiyang asked him what had happened. Maybe it would help him if he told him. But at that time, he didn't believe that Qin Feiyang could help him. Unexpectedly, Shuer met Qin Feiyang by chance and got the life-saving elixir. These 2 days, he had been scolding himself in his heart. If he could have trusted Qin Feiyang back then, would he have wasted so much time? Even if Shuer hadn't met Qin Feiyang by chance, his old father would have died. At that time, it would all be his responsibility, because he missed the opportunity to save his old father. When his old father passed away, it would be useless to know that Qin Feiyang had a life-saving elixir. To be more serious, he had almost killed his old father. "The tea is ready." Yi Zhong's voice sounded in the courtyard. "Little brother, let's go and have some tea." The old man in sackcloth looked at Qin Feiyang and smiled. "Okay." Qin Feiyang nodded. The four of them returned to the courtyard. The old man in sackcloth suddenly said, "By the way, little brother, I forgot to ask you just now. Do you like tea or wine?" "I don't drink. However, this junior is quite fond of tea." Qin Feiyang smiled. Not bad, not bad. It's rare for young people nowadays to not drink. This wine, drinking a little is fine, but drinking too much is harmful to the body. It's not as comfortable as drinking tea." The old man in sackcloth smiled with relief. The more he looked at Qin Feiyang, the more he liked him. Chapter 2535. Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded. No wonder Yi Cheng liked tea so much. It turned out that he had a father who loved tea so much. Entering the courtyard, Qin Feiyang sat at the stone table, under the warm hospitality of the old man in sackcloth. The tea on the table bubbled, and the fragrance of tea filled the air. The woman in white smelled the tea, and looked at Qin Feiyang with a smile. "This is the tea that second grandpa gave to great grandpa. It's the best tea. Try it." "The best tea?" Qin Feiyang was stunned. However, Yi Cheng had an awkward expression on his face. What kind of tea was the best tea? It was not at the same level as the tea that Qin Feiyang drank. The old man in sackcloth looked at Yi Zhong, who was sitting at the side, and said, "What are you doing? Hurry up and pour us some tea." Cough cough. Yi Zhong immediately choked and coughed violently. "You've brewed the tea, and you still want me to brew it? My father, can't you leave me some face? How can I face this disciple in the future?" The woman in white was very sensible. Seeing Yi Zhong's dissatisfaction, she stood up and picked up the teapot and smiled. "Let me do it." Her movements were very elegant, and had the demeanor of a lady from a noble family. At this moment, Yi Zhong sighed in relief. Fortunately, there was a well-behaved granddaughter to help him out. The woman in white poured tea for them one by one, and looked at Qin Feiyang with a smile. "Try it." Qin Feiyang picked up the teacup and sniffed it. "Isn't this the tea that Yi Cheng gave me last time in the duty hall?" And from the beginning to the end, Yi Cheng had an awkward look on his face, because he had tasted Qin Feiyang's tea in the Black Tortoise world. That was the real best tea. "How is it?" The old man in sackcloth looked at Qin Feiyang expectantly. Qin Feiyang glanced at Yi Cheng next to him, tasted it slightly, and nodded with a smile. "It's indeed good tea." Cough cough. Yi Cheng coughed dryly, and his expression became even more awkward. "I don't have many hobbies. The only thing I like to do is to drink tea. Thus, I would often have the two of them gather some good tea for me. If you like it, I can give you some as a gift for our first meeting." The linen-clothed old man smiled. "You're still giving me gifts?" Yi Cheng really couldn't sit still and hurriedly said, "Lord Father, if you want to drink tea, then drink tea. Why are you saying so much? What a joke. Other people's tea was 1,000 times better than this, no, 10,000 times better. How could they like this kind of tea? He even gave her a greeting gift. How embarrassing," the old man in sackcloth said angrily. "Little brother, you've saved my old life and you're not even willing to give me some tea leaves?" "My old father. That's not what I meant. I'll be frank with you. Li Bu'er was being polite to you," Yi Cheng said bitterly. "What do you mean?" The linen-clothed old man was suspicious. Yi Zhong and the white-clothed woman also looked at Yi Cheng in confusion. Qin Feiyang said, "Deputy Palace Master, let's not talk about this anymore in case it's awkward. I'm afraid that if I don't talk about it, it'll get even more awkward later." Yi Cheng shook his head and looked at the linen-clothed old man. "Li Bu'er has a type of tea that's countless times better than ours." The linen-clothed old man was slightly stunned and hurriedly looked at Qin Feiyang, asking, "Little brother, is that true?" Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled bitterly. "Old man, I do prefer my own tea, but that's just my personal preference. Please don't misunderstand." "Misunderstand what? Good is good. In the way of tea, there's no such thing as awkwardness. Since little brother has such good tea, can I have a taste?" The linen-clothed old man looked at Qin Feiyang eagerly. "Lord Father, you..." Yi Cheng was a little frustrated. "Why can't I change this bad habit of mine? As soon as I hear that there's good tea, I'll ask for it regardless of whether I know it or not. That's way too rude." Yi Zhong had a helpless look on his face. Obviously, this old father of his was also quite a headache. However, the white-clothed woman looked at Qin Feiyang curiously. This, Qin Feiyang wanted to refuse, fearing that the situation would be awkward. But looking at the linen-clothed old man's eyes, he couldn't refuse. "Okay." Qin Feiyang took out a sealed tea jar, which was made by Fire Lotus, and had not been opened yet. He smiled and said, "Old man, I'll give this to you. I hope you don't mind." Of course not, of course not." The linen-clothed old man waved his hand and looked at Yi Zhong. "Hurry up, change the tea." Yi Zhong's face stiffened, and he glanced at the white-clothed woman. "Why are you looking at Xue? Xue and Brother Li are both young people. They have common topics to talk about when they're together. You're already so old. Why are you joining in the fun? Hurry up." The linen-clothed old man scolded angrily. Yi Zhong's forehead immediately creased with black lines. Qin Feiyang looked at Yi Zhong from the side, and couldn't help but want to laugh. The dignified Grand Hall Master of the Dragon God Palace, who was not weaker than the ancestors, and the various ancestral dragons, was actually being scolded to the point of bleeding. If this were to spread out, it would definitely cause an unprecedented sensation. The white-clothed woman and Yi Cheng's faces were also flushed red. What about the Grand Hall Master? So what if he was a supreme expert? In front of his great-grandfather, in front of his old father, wasn't he still able to scold him whenever he wanted? He didn't even dare to retort. Yi Zhong glanced at Qin Feiyang, then looked at Yi Cheng and said, Yi Cheng. Yi Cheng immediately turned his head to look elsewhere, as if he didn't hear anything. Do you want me to invite you with a stick? The linen-clothed old man shouted. Don't be angry, I'll change it. Yi Zhong immediately stood up and glared fiercely at Yi Cheng. Then, he picked up the teapot and angrily walked toward the wooden house. What was going on? In any case, he was still a reputable person. How could he be ordered around like this? What kind of nonsense was that? Wait a minute. It seemed that from the beginning until now, his old father had been calling Li Bu little brother all the time? And just now, he even called him Brother Li? Brother? Master and disciple? What the hell was this? If that was the case, didn't he have to call this kid uncle? It was a mess. Everything was a mess. Looking at the embarrassed Yi Zhong, the white-clothed woman said in a low voice, Great-grandfather, leave some face for grandfather. No matter how good he is still my son. No matter how bad I am still his father. Why should I leave him face? Let's talk about it later. There are no outsiders here. Why should I leave him face? The linen-clothed old man snorted coldly. No outsiders? The white-clothed woman was stunned and glanced at Qin Feiyang. Wasn't this an outsider? However, it seemed that in the eyes of her great-grandfather, this person was already family. The white-clothed woman looked at Qin Feiyang and said apologetically, Don't take offense. Our family is like this. It's okay. I quite like this atmosphere. It's relaxed. There's no pressure. Qin Feiyang waved his hand. The linen-clothed old man said, Brotherly, if you like it, you can come here often to play. Okay. Qin Feiyang nodded. Although Yi Zhong was in a sorry state, this old man's personality was very straightforward. He spoke whatever was on his mind and did not hide anything. He was not like those hypocrites who said one thing on the surface and another behind their backs. The white-clothed woman stood up and stretched out her hand in front of Qin Feiyang. She smiled and said, Let me formally introduce myself. I am Yi Shui, Yi Zhong's granddaughter. Li Bu a nobody. Qin Feiyang also stood up and smiled. He gently shook Yi Shui's hand and then retracted it. If you're a nobody, then what am I? Now in the north, who doesn't know your name, Li Bu? Yi Shui shook her head and returned to the stone bench. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly and said, Reputation is not necessarily a good thing. The linen-clothed old man sized up Qin Feiyang and said with a smile, Brotherly, may I take the liberty to ask something? Go ahead. Qin Feiyang said with a smile. Where do you live? Who is in your family? The linen-clothed old man said. Qin Feiyang was stunned. Was he checking the entrance of the household? Yi Cheng was also shocked and hurriedly said, Father, why are you asking this? He knew Qin Feiyang's identity, and Qin Feiyang's identity was a minefield that could not be touched. Yes, great-grandfather. That's too presumptuous. Yi Shui was also unhappy. That's why I'm taking the liberty to ask. The linen-clothed old man glanced at the two of them and looked at Qin Feiyang with a smile. Brotherly, you don't mind, right? If you do, just pretend that I didn't ask. It's okay. Qin Feiyang shook his head and said with a smile. Actually, I don't know where I'm from either. What do you mean? The linen-clothed old man was suspicious. Great-grandfather. If he said that, then there must be a painful past. Aren't you deliberately making him feel uncomfortable by getting to the root of the matter? Yi Shui said unhappily. The linen-clothed old man was stunned and nodded. Yes, brotherly, I'm really sorry. It's okay. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. At this moment, Yi Zhong walked out with the teapot in his hand and looked very calm. The linen-clothed old man immediately stared at the teapot and looked forward to it. Yi Zhong opened the teapot. A burst of tea fragrance immediately overflowed. Yi Zhong was slightly stunned. He took out a tea leaf, put it at the tip of his nose and sniffed it. Then, he put it in his mouth, and a look of shock flashed across his old eyes. What kind of tea leaf was this? The taste was so pure. When he came back to his senses, he quickly grabbed some tea leaves and put them into the teapot, then poured some water. The tea fragrance became stronger. The entire courtyard was filled with the tea fragrance. The linen-clothed old man's eyes were shining. The tea fragrance alone was incomparable to the previous tea. Great-grandfather, try it. Yi Shui picked up the teapot and poured a small cup for the linen-clothed old man. Generally speaking, the tea leaves had to be filtered. That was to say, the first tea had to be poured away. This was because many tea leaves had a bitter taste when they were first served. On the other hand, this was also to wash away the stains on the tea leaves. But the tea leaves cultivated by the fire lotus were different. Not only was the taste of the first tea not bitter, but it was also more pure. As for the stains on the tea leaves, it was even more impossible. Because this was drunk by Qin Feiyang. The fire lotus was very clean when it was made. The linen-clothed old man picked up the teacup, smelled it first, then put it to his mouth and gently took a sip. At that moment, his old eyes were shining. Was this tea? No. This was immortal dew, the immortal of tea. He had never drunk such good tea in his life. Yi Zhong looked at his old father, and also picked up the teacup and tasted it. His eyes were full of envy. This was indeed not something their tea leaves could compare to. The linen-clothed old man looked at Qin Feiyang and asked, "Brotherly, may I ask, where did you get these tea leaves?" Qin Feiyang smiled and said, "They were personally cultivated by my younger sister." Amazing. Brotherly is really a blessed person to have such a sister, who is so good at cultivating tea trees. I'm really envious. The linen-clothed old man said, "Senior, you flatter me." Qin Feiyang shook his head. The linen-clothed old man looked at Yi Zhong and said, "In the future when you send me tea, you must also send such tea leaves." "Father, aren't you making things difficult for us?" The brothers smiled bitterly. "I don't care. If it can't compare to this tea, don't send it to me." The linen-clothed old man said with a cold face. Okay. The two of them nodded helplessly. The linen-clothed old man said, "Then you two brothers hurry up and cook." "We cook." The two of them widened their eyes and jumped up. "What? Do you want me to cook it myself?" The linen-clothed old man's face was stern. When he saw the two of them looking at Yi Shui, he said angrily, "Don't look at Shui, go by yourself." Sigh. The brothers got up, shook their heads, sighed, and walked towards the wooden building. Since when did people of their statuses cook for themselves? Wasn't this making things difficult for them? This old man really knew how to torture people. Chapter 2536. Qin Feiyang looked at their backs, and couldn't help but laugh. This was the first time he saw Yi Zhong being so wasteful. It also proved one thing. No matter how strong one was, there would still be people they were afraid of. "Grandpa." Suddenly, Yi Shui stood up and called out to Yi Zhong. "What?" Yi Zhong turned around and looked at her unhappily. He seemed to be blaming Yi Shui for not helping him out. Yi Shui took out a milky white token from her arms and handed it to Yi Zhong. Qin Feiyang's pupils constricted. He had seen this token before. Yi Cheng also had one. According to Yi Cheng, there were a total of 3 tokens. They were in the hands of the brothers and the Beast Emperor in the Internal Sea. It turned out that Yi Shui had taken this token to enter the Dragon God Hall. "Here you go. Be careful when cooking, don't burn the house." Yi Shui held back her laughter and said, "Wretched girl." Yi Zhong glared at Yi Shui, kept the token, and entered the wooden building. After a while, smoke rose from the kitchen. Brotherly, come have some tea." The old man in linen warmly greeted Qin Feiyang. "Old senior, you should change the way you address him. You can't mess up the seniority." Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled bitterly. "That's right. If you call him brother, then how should I address him in the future?" Yi Shui was helpless. The more she called him, the smoother it got. Haha, that's true. The old man in linen rubbed Yi Shui's head and looked at Qin Feiyang. "Then tell me, how should I address you in the future?" Qin Feiyang pondered. "To be honest, This form of address was really troublesome, because the seniority difference was too big. Yi Shui thought for a while and smiled. Isn't his name Li Buer? Why don't you call him Xiao Li Xiao? That's impolite. The old man in linen shook his head. Is there? No. Yi Shui was doubtful. The old man shook his head and smiled. He looked at Qin Feiyang and said, How about this? This old man will call you Little Friendly from now on. Sure. Qin Feiyang nodded. The old man in sackcloth said, Little Friendly, may I ask if your sister is with you? You. Qin Feiyang looked at him in confusion. The linen-clothed old man smiled and said, This old man would like to ask her how these tea leaves are cultivated. I see. Qin Feiyang nodded in understanding and said apologetically, I'm sorry, my little sister is not with me right now. A trace of disappointment appeared in the old man's eyes as he said, If you have the chance in the future, please let this old man meet her. All right. Qin Feiyang nodded. He didn't want Fire Lotus to appear in public. After all, Yi Zhong was the person Longzuan trusted the most. The identity of the Fire Lotus was also a taboo. What if Yi Zhong noticed something? So he couldn't take the risk. About an hour passed. Yi Zhong and his brother finally came out with 4 side dishes in their hands. However, the two of them looked funny. Both of them were covered in dust. I asked you to cook a meal, but you actually turned out like this. How embarrassing. The linen-clothed old man didn't hide it, and stared at them. The two of them felt extremely wronged. For them, being able to cook this meal was already very difficult. Even if it wasn't an exaggeration, they should at least be encouraged. They didn't expect to be ruthlessly criticized. It seemed that this old man was determined to embarrass them today. Let's eat, let's eat. Yi Qing coughed dryly, and said with a smile, In all my life, I've never seen them cook with their own hands. The taste may not be good, please bear with it. Yi Shui glanced at the side dishes on the table, and transmitted her voice to Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang shook his head and laughed. To be honest, these few dishes made people lose their appetite. However, it was rare for the two of them to cook like this for the first time. Qin Feiyang picked up his chopsticks, and picked up a piece of green vegetable. When he was about to try it, he found that Yi Zhong and Yi Cheng were staring at him. They looked quite nervous. Why are you looking at him? Yi Shui looked at the two of them suspiciously, and also picked up a piece of green vegetable, and put it in her mouth. Yi Zhong and Yi Cheng quickly looked at Yi Shui. Yi Shui swallowed it, took out a snow-white handkerchief, wiped the oil stains at the corner of her mouth and nodded. The taste is okay. Really? Yi Zhong and his brother were quite excited when they heard this. Really? Yi Shui answered very seriously. Yi Zhong and his brother looked at Qin Feiyang again. Qin Feiyang looked at the two brothers, and then at Yi Shui, suspiciously. Why did this woman's expression look strange? He braced himself, and put the green vegetable in his mouth. His body immediately froze. This was okay. How is it? Yi Zhong and his brother looked at Qin Feiyang nervously. Qin Feiyang swallowed hard and nodded. For someone who is cooking for the first time, this taste is okay. Great-grandpa, grandpa, second grandpa, you should try it too. Yi Shui smiled. The old man in linen looked at Yi Shui and Qin Feiyang and said, You're not lying to me, are you? Yi Shui said, How would we dare to lie to you? It's really okay. Qin Feiyang felt a little guilty. The old man in linen picked up a piece of green vegetable, and put it in his mouth. His expression changed immediately, and it was very interesting. Father, how is it? Yi Zhong and his brother looked at him and asked. The old man in linen secretly glared at Yi Zhong and nodded at Yi Shui, and said with a smile, It's very good. Yi Zhong and his brother looked at each other and smiled. They did not expect to be recognized by everyone on their first time cooking. It seemed that they were also talented. The two of them also grabbed their chopsticks, picked up a piece of green vegetable, and put it in their mouths. Immediately, the smile on their faces froze. Following that, the two of them turned around and vomited. Why is it so salty? Is this something that humans eat? The old man in linen laughed out loud. Yi Shui and Qin Feiyang could not help but snicker. The brothers smiled bitterly, looked at the old man in linen and said helplessly, Father, is there anyone like you? Following that, Yi Zhong glared at Qin Feiyang and Yi Shui again. One is the Grand Hall Master of the Dragon God Palace, and the other is the Vice Hall Master of the Law Enforcement Palace. What kind of bullshit are they making? Why don't you guys taste it before cooking? The old man in linen held his chopsticks and flipped through a few dishes with a look of disdain. The two brothers lowered their heads, their faces filled with embarrassment. Forget it, I'll cook it myself. You can't count on me. Little girl Shui, clean up. The old man in linen shook his head, stood up, and quickly walked into the wooden building. Yi Shui shook her head and smiled, cleaned up the dishes on the table, and also went to help. Qin Feiyang looked at the embarrassed Yi Zhong, and Yi Shui coughed dryly and said, "About that, I'll go help as well." "Sit down," Yi Zhong said with a dark face. Qin Feiyang's expression froze, and when he returned to the stone bench, his entire body felt uncomfortable. Yi Zhong said, "You've seen enough jokes. How would this disciple dare to laugh at you, master?" Qin Feiyang smiled embarrassedly. "Come on, let me tell you. You are not allowed to mention what you saw today to anyone." Yi Zhong said angrily. Qin Feiyang slyly said, "This doesn't seem to be something shameful, right?" "What did you say?" Yi Zhong immediately glared at Qin Feiyang fiercely. Good. I won't say anything." Qin Feiyang hurriedly waved his hand. Yi Zhong shook his head helplessly, turned to look at Yi Cheng and sighed. "I think father deliberately embarrassed us today." "I think so too." Yi Cheng smiled bitterly. Yi Zhong took a deep breath, looked at Qin Feiyang and said, "Li Bu, while the old master is not here, I'd like to ask you a few questions seriously." Yi Cheng, who was next to him, was stunned. He looked at Yi Zhong, and then at Qin Feiyang, looking a little nervous. "Go ahead." Qin Feiyang's eyes flickered slightly, and he looked at Yi Zhong. Yi Zhong said, "Where are you from?" Qin Feiyang sighed secretly. Sure enough, he could not avoid the interrogation. When he was in the treasure school yesterday, he had already expected that Yi Zhong would come to ask about his background sooner or later. Because Yi Zhong would not let a person of unknown origin become his disciple. Dragons would not allow it either. "I want to hear the truth." Yi Zhong stared at Qin Feiyang. Yi Cheng was also extremely uneasy. He did not know if Qin Feiyang had made preparations in advance. However, Qin Feiyang did not change his expression, shook his head and said, "I don't want to talk about these things. You have to answer me, because this is Long Zun's order. If you don't say it, I'm afraid even I can't help you." Yi Zhong said. "What? Long Zun?" Qin Feiyang was shocked. "That's right. After leaving the treasure school yesterday, I went to see Long Zun and told him about accepting you as his disciple." Long Zun did not object at that time. He only said one sentence, that we must find out your origin. Yi Zhong said. Qin Feiyang asked, "Then according to what you said, if there is no problem with my origin, Long Zun will still think highly of me?" "You are very smart." "That's right. If there is no problem with your identity, dragons will focus on training you," Yi Zhong said. Qin Feiyang pondered. In that case, it was still an opportunity to enter the dragon's inner circle? To be honest, after understanding the power of dragons, he did not have much confidence in destroying the dragons. But if he could enter the dragon's inner circle and get close to Long Zun, it might be easier. "As my disciple, you already have a high status and power. But in the end, power and status are just worldly possessions. Your own strength is the foundation. If there is no problem with your identity, I can use my connections to let you enter the Divine Dragon Island." Yi Zhong said. "Enter the Divine Dragon Island?" Qin Feiyang was stunned. "You probably don't know yet, but the Divine Dragon Island has a time array. 30 years in a day." Yi Zhong said. 30 years in a day. Qin Feiyang was shocked. Yi Zhong continued. "And this time array covers the entire Divine Dragon Island. So it's like that. No wonder other than dragons, no one is allowed to step into the Divine Dragon Island." Qin Feiyang suddenly understood. However, 30 years in a day was very awesome. Even the time array of the Dragon Slayer Palace could not compare. One had to know. The Dragon Slayer Palace had a time array of 50 years in a day. Not to mention compared to the Black Tortoise World and the ancient castle. For Qin Feiyang, This time array was not tempting at all. Of course, this was something that he definitely could not show. Chapter 2537. Yi Cheng, who was next to him, was also a little disdainful, because he knew how terrifying the time law of the castle and the Black Tortoise realm were. A large part of the reason why he chose to follow Qin Feiyang was because of this. But Yi Zhong didn't know. From his point of view, allowing Qin Feiyang to enter the Divine Dragon Island was an enormous favor. Yi Zhong said, "Tell me, don't lie to this old man." Qin Feiyang pondered for a while and shook his head. "Actually, I don't know my background, let alone who my parents are." Yi Zhong was stunned. Yi Qing heaved a sigh of relief. Looking at Qin Feiyang's relaxed expression, he should be prepared. "I won't hide it from you. I was raised by an old man," Qin Feiyang said. "Old man?" Yi Zhong was suspicious. "I don't know his name. It is said that he picked me up in the wilderness. When he picked me up, I was still a baby. The old man didn't know who my parents were, so he let me take his surname Li. He named me Li Bu-er for a reason. He wanted me to be a man of my word no matter what happened, or who I met when I grew up. To be an honest and decisive person," Qin Feiyang said. "What's the old man's name? Where is he now?" Yi Zhong asked. "His name is Li Xiaoyao. I've always called him Uncle Li. As for where Uncle Li is now, I really don't know. That old man is a wild crane with no fixed abode. Ever since I came out to explore the world, he has been traveling the world. Until now he hasn't contacted me." Qin Feiyang shook his head. "Wild crane?" Yi Zhong frowned and asked, "Can you contact him?" "I can't. When we separated, he was afraid that I would rely on him too much, so he erased the contract in the image crystal." Qin Feiyang sighed. "Li Xiaoyao." Yi Zhong frowned. He had been in the Divine Prefecture for countless years. Anyone with a little bit of fame basically knew a thing or two. However, he had never heard of the name Li Xiaoyao. Qin Feiyang said calmly, "He is indifferent to fame and fortune, and likes to travel. I don't think many people know his name." Yi Zhong pondered for a moment and asked, "What's the old man's cultivation?" "I'm not too sure about that. In short, in my eyes, that old man is unfathomable." Qin Feiyang shook his head. Yi Zhong was even more puzzled. "You saw Xiao Jin at the Treasure Pavilion yesterday, right? And amount was not only a 5-clawed golden dragon, but also a beginner Invincible golden dragon is actually his mount. Then how strong was this so-called Li Xiaoyao? Of course, they're protecting me, to him, but more importantly, is more like taking care of me. Therefore, I am very grateful to Uncle Li." Yi Zhong asked. "He was the one who raised me and taught me how to cultivate. Kill the island master when you entered the Dragon God Palace?" Qin Feiyang said. This old woman was Fire Lotus in disguise. To be able to cultivate a talent like you, couldn't tell the truth. He's definitely not an ordinary person. But to Uncle Li, she's also family. They're all here to protect you? With a faint smile. Yi Zhong couldn't believe it. There's still a long way to go. There's a chance. "One more question. Where's that young man? What's your relationship with him?" Yi Zhong said. "Young man?" Qin Feiyang was slightly stunned and shook his head. "I really have nothing to do with him." "Impossible. If you have nothing to do with him, why would he take care of you like this?" Yi Zhong was suspicious. "There's really nothing to do with him. I met him when I entered the Dragon God Palace's examination. At that time, I was troubled by the emissary of the dragons. He couldn't stand it and helped me. Then he took me into the examination place. Our relationship is just like that. To be honest, I've been wondering why he helped me so much. Do you have other intentions?" Qin Feiyang frowned. He didn't lie to Yi Zhong about the young man's attitude. It was the truth. The young man's performance again and again surprised him. What happened before the examination? This old man also asked the emissary of the dragons to investigate. It's indeed as you said. But this old man really doesn't understand. What's his intention for helping him? Are you sure you're telling the truth? Yi Zhong frowned. If you don't believe me, you can ask him yourself. I don't even know his name. Qin Feiyang was helpless. All right then. Yi Zhong nodded. Qin Feiyang secretly breathed a sigh of relief. He finally fooled him. However, in order to completely dispel the doubts in Yi Zhong's heart, he still had to put on a show. In short, in this world, there must be a person like Li Xiaoyao. And Yi Zhong had to see him in person. Thinking of this, Qin Feiyang sent a sound transmission. Fire Lotus, find Huai and tell him to prepare. Okay. Fire Lotus secretly replied. Fire Lotus was in the castle and heard all the conversations between Qin Feiyang and Yi Zhong, so she knew what to do. Time to eat. The linen-clothed old man and Yi Shui walked out with 4 side dishes. He had to admit, the old man and Yi Shui's culinary skills were far from what the Yi Zhong brothers could compare to. The wild vegetables that they grew could be made into exquisite dishes. The taste was also top-notch. Although the dishes were simple, they ate happily, especially Yi Zhong and Yi Cheng. To be able to sit and eat with their old father, their hearts were filled with happiness. Yi Shui was the same. Grandfather and second grandfather were usually busy people, and it was rare for them to come home. All these years, it was usually her and her great-grandfather who accompanied each other. Therefore, for her, there was nothing more blissful than being together with her family. Looking at the family of 4, Qin Feiyang couldn't help but reveal a smile on his face. Life was actually so simple. It was just that many people weren't easy to be satisfied and pursued too many things, so they neglected these things. After a busy life, looking back, it turned out that these were the things that were worth cherishing the most. Mother, father, grandfather, great-grandfather, second grandfather, little cousin Fatso Xiaohong. Are you guys doing well now? Figures constantly flashed in his mind. Qin Feiyang's heart missed them very much. After eating, Qin Feiyang accompanied the linen-clothed old man to the river, fishing, drinking tea and chatting. The linen-clothed old man was very talkative. Usually he was the one talking, and Qin Feiyang listened. Time flew. Night fell. Qin Feiyang got up and said goodbye. The linen-clothed old man was still a little reluctant. After a day of interaction, whether it was Qin Feiyang's speech or character, he admired them very much. In the end, it was only under the advice of Yi Zhong and Yi Cheng that the linen-clothed old man let go and sent Qin Feiyang away. Let me tell you, in the future in the Dragon God Palace, you must take good care of him. The linen-clothed old man looked at the Yi Zhong brothers and said, I know. I've said it hundreds of times. Yi Zhong smiled helplessly, looked at Yi Shui and said, Take good care of great-grandfather. Let's go back to the Dragon God Palace first. Leaving so soon? Yi Shui was stunned. There's no other way. Some time ago, Qin Feiyang caused such a big commotion. Long Zun has already given a death order to get rid of this person. I really didn't expect it. A junior of the future generation actually brought such a big threat to the dragons. Yi Zhong shook his head and sighed. Hearing this, Yi Cheng seemed to want to say something but hesitated. Qin Feiyang. Yi Shui muttered. Wait, grandfather, second grandfather, I think I've seen him somewhere before? What? Yi Zhong and Yi Cheng looked at her in shock. Yi Shui lowered her head and thought for a moment. Her eyes trembled slightly as she said, It can't be such a coincidence. What's wrong? Yi Zhong and Yi Shui were even more surprised. I remember that 9 months ago, in order to find a way to extend great-grandfather's life, I accidentally entered a forest. In the forest I met an unconscious man. He was covered in blood. At that time, I felt that he looked familiar, but because of great-grandfather, I didn't think too much about it. Now that I think about it, he seems to be Qin Feiyang. Yi Shui said. Yi Zhong hurriedly asked, Where is he? It's useless to tell you now, he must have already left. It's quite funny, I actually saved him. Yi Shui smiled bitterly. What? You saved him? Yi Zhong was stunned. Yes. At that time, I saw that he was unconscious on the ground, and there were many fierce beasts around him, so I set up a barrier to protect him. Furthermore, I also gave him a divine life pill, Yi Futian said. If I calculate the time carefully, he should have escaped from the internal sea, and then fell unconscious. Yi Shui shook her head. You little girl. Yi Zhong looked at her speechlessly. She actually saved Qin Feiyang. If Longzuan knew about this, he would definitely misunderstand that he was Qin Feiyang's accomplice. I see. Yi Cheng finally understood in his heart. At first, he was still wondering why Qin Feiyang, who he had never met, would help Shui. It turned out that Shui had saved him before. It was just that even Shui herself didn't know that the person who helped her was Qin Feiyang. Yi Cheng Shui and father, this matter is only known to us. You can't tell anyone else. Yi Zhong took a deep breath and looked at the three of them. Why? Yi Shui was puzzled. Qin Feiyang is Longzuan's greatest enemy. What will Longzuan think if you save him? Although we all know that you did it unintentionally, Longzuan won't think so. If this matter falls into Longzuan's ears, I'm afraid not only you, but even grandfather, second grandfather, and your great-grandfather will be implicated. Yi Zhong said in a deep voice. So serious? Yi Shui was shocked. Yi Zhong sighed. I'm afraid that when that time comes, it will be more serious than what I said. In short, this matter must be kept a secret. Yes. The three of them nodded. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.